Story 1. I used to live in an old farmhouse with my roommate, Jake. It was over 100 years old, one of those creaky, drafty places with a history no one talked about. It was the kind of place that looked fine in the daylight, but always felt just a little too quiet at night. I don't believe in ghosts, never did. But that house, it made me question things. The night it happened, Jake and I were in the living room. He was sprawled out on the couch, half watching some reality show, while I sat in the recliner scrolling through my phone. It was one of those evenings where nothing really happens. Just background noise, dim lighting, and the hum of the old radiator. Then, out of nowhere, bang! The whole house shook. A deep, violent crash came from directly above us, like something massive had slammed into the second-floor bedroom. The ceiling above our heads rattled, the walls trembled, and there was the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Jake and I froze. "What the hell was that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He was already sitting up, eyes wide. "Dude, that was upstairs?" Neither of us moved at first. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That crash hadn't just been loud, it had been forceful. It felt like something had exploded in the room right above us. Then, without thinking, we both bolted for the stairs. I took them two at a time, my mind racing. The layout of the house was simple. At the top of the stairs, there was a hallway with two bedrooms. Mine on the left, Jake's on the right. The noise had come from my room. I was sure of it. Jake was right behind me as I reached my bedroom door. It was closed just as I'd left it. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Jake exhaled sharply. "Just open it, man." I did. The room was fine. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was broken. No shattered glass, no fallen furniture. The window was closed. The bed, the desk, the bookshelf, everything exactly as it had been when I left it. But the room felt wrong. The air was heavy, charged with something I couldn't explain. It was colder too, like a sudden chill had settled in. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the floor. I expected to see a broken mirror, a fallen picture frame, something, anything, that could explain that sound. There was nothing. Jake edged in behind me, rubbing his arms. "Dude, it's freezing in here." I nodded slowly. "You heard it, right? Felt it?" "Of course I did," he said. "That wasn't just, like, the house settling." It wasn't. There was no way a house settling could shake the floor beneath our feet like that. No way a creaky old farmhouse could make a noise so violent, so real. I checked the closet. Empty. Looked under the bed. Nothing. Even the light fixture on the ceiling was intact, swinging slightly but not broken. There was no explanation. Jake let out a nervous chuckle. "Maybe it was outside." I moved to the window and peered out. Darkness stretched across the fields, the barn standing silent in the moonlight. Nothing was out of place. "Nothing," I muttered. Jake ran a hand through his hair, clearly unsettled. "Maybe something hit the roof." We checked. Nothing. We checked the attic too. Nothing. It made no sense. The sound had been so real. The impact had been so violent that we had felt it through the floor. And yet, there was no proof it had happened at all. Jake looked at me. We both heard it. We both felt it. So what the hell was it? I didn't have an answer, and that was the worst part. We went back downstairs, silent, uneasy. Neither of us turned the TV back on. We just sat there in the quiet, trying to convince ourselves that maybe somehow we had imagined it. But we hadn't. Story 2. I grew up in a small one-story house with my mom and younger sister. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old place that had been in our family for years. The layout was pretty simple. 3 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and a long hallway that led to the bathroom and what we called the computer room. The computer room was just a tiny, windowless space at the very end of the hall. We didn't have a proper office, so that's where my mom had set up the family desktop. This was back in the early 2000s, when computers were big, bulky things with boxy monitors and a constant low hum that filled the quiet. I never liked that room. Something about it always felt off. Maybe it was just because it was so closed off from everything else in the house, but it always seemed darker than it should be. Even with the computer on, The glow from the screen barely reached the walls. It was like the light didn't want to spread. One night I was home alone. Mom had taken my sister to a school event, and I had the place to myself. I was in the living room watching TV when I realized I had to use the bathroom. It was down the hallway past the computer room. As I got up, I noticed the faint blue glow spilling from the doorway, the computer screen dimly lighting up the room like usual. I walked down the hall, not really paying attention to anything, just focused on getting to the bathroom. But as I passed the computer room, I saw something that made me stop mid-step. A shadow moved across the wall. It wasn't fast, like a trick of the eyes. It was slow, deliberate, like someone had stepped in front of the computer screen, blocking the light. My brain froze for a second, but then I laughed at myself. "Geez, you scared me," I said, assuming my sister had somehow snuck back home without me noticing. But no one answered. That's when I felt it. A deep, gnawing wrongness in my stomach. The kind of feeling that tells you something isn't right before your brain even catches up. I turned my head, expecting to see my sister or my mom standing there. But the room was empty, completely empty. The chair was pushed under the desk. The only movement was the faint flickering of the screen. There was no place for anyone to hide. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. My hands went cold. I wanted to move, to step away, to do anything. But I was frozen, just standing there staring into that empty room. Then right as I was about to back away, the computer screen dimmed, like something passed in front of it again. But there was no one there. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't check. I didn't breathe. I just bolted straight for the front door. My hands fumbled with the lock, but I yanked it open and ran outside onto the porch, gasping like I'd been underwater. I stood there for what felt like forever, my legs shaking, listening to the silence of the house behind me. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But I knew that something had been in there. After what must have been 20 minutes, I forced myself to go back inside. Not because I wanted to, but because standing on the porch all night wasn't an option. I crept through the house, turning on every single light as I went. When I finally reached the hallway, I stood there staring at the doorway to the computer room, dreading what I might see. The screen was still on. The glow was steady. Nothing moved. But I couldn't go back down that hallway. I couldn't even look at that room without feeling like something was looking back. For weeks after that, I refused to use the bathroom at night. I'd hold it until morning if I had to. If I absolutely couldn't wait, I'd leave the door open so I could run if I had to. Eventually, I told my mom about it. I expected her to laugh it off, tell me it was just my imagination. But instead, she got quiet. "You know," she said after a long pause, "your uncle used to say the same thing when he lived here." I just stared at her. "What?" She shrugged, acting like it wasn't a big deal, but I could see the way her hands fidgeted. "When he was younger, before he moved out, he always said he saw something in that room." I felt sick. "What did he see?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "He never wanted to talk about it." I never set foot in that room again. Not at night, not alone. Some things are better left alone. Story 3. I grew up in one of those nice, quiet suburban neighborhoods where every house looked the same. My family had spent years living in rougher conditions, saving up to finally buy something decent. When we moved into our new house, it felt like a step up. A model home that the builders had used to show off the neighborhood, which meant we got a decent deal on it. It was spacious, bright, and open, with this big loft area that overlooked the living room. 2 stairwells led up to it, one in the front and one in the back. The way it was designed, sound carried. You could be up in the loft and hear anything going on downstairs, and vice versa. It was the perfect hangout spot. I spent a lot of time up there with my 2 best friends, Jason and Sarah. We were in high school and they had this whole will they won't they thing going on, except it was less romantic and more just them constantly being all over each other. I was used to it. It got annoying sometimes, but whatever. One afternoon, the 3 of us were lounging in the loft watching TV. Jason had his arm around Sarah, and she was practically curled into his lap. I got up to take a piss, leaving them doing their usual thing. When I came back, something was off. They were on opposite sides of the couch. Sarah looked tense, her arms crossed, and Jason was sitting stiffly, staring at the TV but not really watching it. The mood had shifted, and I could tell right away. "What happened?" I asked. Jason turned to me, looking confused. "Your little sister's home." I stopped mid-step. My stomach dropped. "What?" "We heard her," Sarah said. "Just now." I stared at them, not moving. "No one's here." Jason frowned. "Dude, we heard her clear as day. She was giggling, like right behind the couch." Sarah nodded. "It was quick, but we both heard it, like a little laugh and footsteps. We thought she had snuck up here." My mouth was dry. "My sister's not home." They looked at each other, then back at me. Jason let out a nervous chuckle. "Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. We heard something." I felt sick. My little sister Emma was 8 years old. She was at a friend's house. I knew that for a fact because my mom had just texted me an hour ago saying she'd be there until dinner. I forced a laugh, trying to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. "You probably heard something from outside. Sound carries weird in here." Sarah shook her head. It was right behind us." I turned and looked at the space behind the couch. Just an open area leading to the stairs. No place to hide. Jason stood up. "Let's check the house." I didn't want to. Every part of me was screaming not to, but I couldn't back out now. So we went downstairs, checked the kitchen, the living room, even the front door. Dead bolted. We walked through the hall, past the laundry room, the empty bedrooms. Nothing. No one. We checked every closet, every room. I even opened the pantry and looked behind the coats in the hall closet, just to be sure. Jason scratched the back of his head. "That's really weird." Sarah's face was pale. "It was a little girl. I know what I heard." I didn't say anything. We went back upstairs to the loft, trying to brush it off, but the atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavier, like the room was pressing in. None of us sat back down. Jason finally exhaled and gave a short laugh, shaking his head. "All right, that was creepy, but We heard it, all three of us, a giggle, right behind us. It was unmistakable, software playful, like a child amused by some private joke. Jason spun around so fast he nearly tripped over himself. Sarah clapped her hand over her mouth. I couldn't move. My legs locked in place. There was nothing there, just empty space. Then, footsteps, running down the back stairwell. Light, quick, like a child darting away. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was at the railing, looking down the stairs. Nothing. No one. But I could still hear it. Faint. The sound of small feet hitting the floor. Then silence. Sarah bolted. She didn't say a word, just grabbed her things and ran down the front stairs. Jason was right behind her. I didn't stop them. I wanted to leave too, but it was my house. My empty house. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening, my pulse hammering in my ears, waiting. Finally, I forced myself to go downstairs, checking everything again. But I knew I wouldn't find anything. I sat on the couch and waited for my mom to get home. When she did, I casually asked when she was picking up Emma. She gave me a weird look and said, "Not for another couple hours." I never told her what happened. Story 4. I grew up in a rural town, the kind of place where streetlights didn't exist and houses were scattered far apart. My family's house sat at the end of a long, winding back road that was flanked on both sides by thick woods. Every morning I had to walk about half a mile down that road to catch the school bus. It was a routine I was used to, even in the dark, even in the cold. This particular morning was no different at first. It was early, just before dawn, the sky a dull gray as the night bled into morning. The air was damp, and the world felt quiet, that strange, eerie kind of quiet that happens right before the sun comes up. The only sound was my footsteps crunching on the gravel. Then about halfway down the road, I stopped. Something felt off. It wasn't a sound or a movement, just a feeling. The kind that raises the hairs on your arms before your brain even has time to process what's wrong. I turned my head slowly to my left, towards the woods. That's when I saw them. A group of dogs stood just beyond the tree line, their bodies barely visible in the dim light. They weren't wolves. They weren't coyotes. They were dogs, actual dogs of all different breeds. A German Shepherd, a Labrador, a Dalmatian, a shaggy mutt, and others I couldn't identify. 8 or 9 of them standing side by side, perfectly still, watching me. My heart thumped hard against my ribs. I took a hesitant step forward, hoping they'd move, that they'd scatter like normal dogs would. They didn't. Instead, they stepped onto the road. Not aggressively, not running or barking, just stepping forward in eerie unison, forming a half circle in front of me, blocking my path. I froze. My breath hitched. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. These were just dogs, right? Strays? Maybe they belonged to someone. Maybe they had just gathered here for some reason. But why weren't they making a sound? No growling, no panting, no sniffing, no barking, nothing. They just stood there staring at me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I didn't dare break eye contact. I was afraid that if I did, they would lunge. My breathing came faster, my hands shaking at my sides. The road was empty. There were no cars, no people, no houses close enough for anyone to hear me if I screamed. The bus stop was too far ahead. My house was too far behind. I was trapped. Then, as if something unseen had given them a silent command, the dogs took another step forward. I took a step back. They stepped forward again. A creeping horror spread through me. They weren't just wandering strays. This was deliberate, coordinated. Something was wrong. I couldn't do this. I couldn't stand there and wait for whatever was going to happen next. I turned and bolted back toward my house. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see them chasing me, didn't want to see how fast they were moving. All I knew was that my feet had never hit the ground so hard. My lungs had never burned so much. I ran, my backpack bouncing against me, the cold air slicing my throat. The trees blurred past in my peripheral vision, and my ears strained for the sound of paws pounding on the gravel behind me. But there was nothing, just silence. And that was somehow worse. I burst through my front door, gasping, slamming it shut behind me. My mother looked up from the kitchen, startled. "What's wrong?" she asked. I couldn't answer right away. I was too busy gulping down air, my whole body shaking. "Dogs," I finally managed. "There were dogs, on the road. They wouldn't move." She frowned. "Strays?" I nodded frantically, unable to explain why this felt like so much more than that. She went to the window, peering out toward the road. The sky had brightened a little now, the early morning gloom fading away. "There's nothing out there," she said. I hesitated. Then, despite every instinct telling me not to, I stepped forward and pulled the curtain aside. She was right. The road was empty. No dogs, no movement. No sign that anything had ever been there at all. Just silence. Story 5. I don't believe in ghosts, or at least I didn't before this happened. Last year, my mom and I stayed in a hotel while she was attending a work conference. It was a decent place, nothing fancy, but not run down either. Just a normal chain hotel with a lobby that smelled like citrus cleaner and carpets that had seen better days. We had a standard room with 2 beds, a desk, a TV, and a bathroom. Nothing about it stood out. The first few nights were completely normal. My mom would come back from her conference sessions, we'd watch TV for a bit, and then we'd go to sleep. I'd scroll on my phone until I got tired, then eventually pass out. Nothing weird, nothing creepy. But on our last night there, something changed. I don't know what woke me up. I wasn't having a nightmare, and I don't remember hearing any sounds. But for some reason, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, trying to figure out why I was awake. That's when I saw it. Across the room near the window was a shadow, a human-shaped shadow. I froze. My brain immediately tried to make sense of it. It had to be some kind of illusion. Maybe a coat hanging weirdly. Maybe the way the light from the parking lot outside filtered through the curtains. But as I lay there, barely breathing, I realized something that made my stomach twist. The shadow wasn't cast on the wall. It was standing in the room. I turned my head slightly, trying to convince myself I was just seeing things. But the shape didn't change. It was definitely the outline of a person. Tall, unmoving, no features, no details. just a solid, human-shaped darkness standing less than 2 meters from my bed. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would wake my mom, but she was still asleep in the other bed, breathing evenly. I considered calling out to her, but something about the silence in the room made me afraid to speak. It felt like if I acknowledged it, something worse would happen. Instead, I reached over and turned on the lamp beside my bed. Instantly, the room was bathed in warm yellow light. The shadow was gone. I exhaled shakily, feeling stupid for getting so worked up. Of course, it was nothing. I was just half asleep, seeing things. Probably some weird trick of my tired brain. But just to be sure, I scanned the room. The window, the curtains, the desk. Nothing was out of place. There was nothing in the room that could have made a shadow like that. I told myself I was being paranoid and turned the light off. The shadow was back. My whole body went cold. It was standing in the exact same spot, the same shape, the same posture. It hadn't moved at all, but it also hadn't been there when the light was on. It was like it only existed in the dark. I turned the light back on. Gone. Office back again. I did this 3 more times, my breathing growing more panicked each time. Every single time the room went dark, the shadow returned. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't an illusion. It was real, and it was standing right there. I wanted to wake my mom, but something about the way the air felt, thick, heavy, wrong, made me too afraid to move. It wasn't just fear. It was an instinctual kind of terror, like my body knew something my mind didn't. Like if I acknowledged it too much, something would happen. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned away. I rolled over so my back was to it, curled up under the blanket like a child, and squeezed my eyes shut. I told myself that if I ignored it, if I refused to acknowledge it, it would go away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. I lay there for what felt like hours, every muscle in my body tense. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up to sunlight streaming through the window. The shadow was gone. Everything looked normal. My mom was already up, getting ready for the last day of her conference. I wanted to tell her what happened, but the words felt ridiculous in my mouth. What was I supposed to say? That a shadow stood in our room all night? That I was afraid to look at it? That I thought something terrible would happen if I moved? Instead, I asked her if she slept well. Yeah, she said, stuffing some papers into her bag. Why? No reason. I looked back at the spot by the window. Empty. I can't explain what I saw. I know it wasn't just my imagination. I know it wasn't a dream. That shadow was there. It was real. And it was watching me. I don't know what would have happened if I had turned around again. And I don't ever want to find out. Story 6, I never really believed in ghosts. Not in the way most people talk about them, at least. I always figured when people said they saw something, it was just tricks of the light, their brain playing games with them, or some weird half-dream state. But then I spent the night in my aunt's old house, and now I don't know what to think anymore. She grew up there, my aunt. It's an old house, the kind that settles into itself at night, making noises that could be anything if you let your mind wander too much. She used to tell me stories about strange things happening when she was a kid. Things moving, doors closing on their own. She never sounded scared when she talked about it. More like it was just a fact of life in that house. I thought she was messing with me. Then she told me about the night she woke up and saw the boy. I didn't believe her at first. It sounded too much like sleep paralysis, the way she described it. Waking up in the dark, not being able to move, a shadow standing over her. But the way she said it, the way her voice went quiet, made me uneasy. The thing is, she told me, when I finally moved, my bed wasn't in the same place anymore. I laughed it off, even though something about it made my stomach tighten. I told her it was probably just a dream. She didn't argue, but she didn't laugh either. She just looked at me and said, "You'll see." I was staying the night because I was passing through town, and she offered me a place to crash. The room I stayed in used to be hers, the same room where she saw the boy. She didn't mention that part until I was already settling in for the night. "You can take the guest room," she said. Then she hesitated. "Actually, never mind. You can sleep in my old room." I must have made a face because she grinned at me. "What, you scared?" I wasn't. At least that's what I told myself. It was just a room. 4 walls, a bed, a dresser, and a closet. Nothing weird about it. But when I lay down, the room felt off, like it wasn't quite empty, like someone had just been there a second before I walked in. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. That's what the dark does. It makes everything feel bigger and stranger than it really is. So I closed my eyes and forced myself to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark. The kind of dark that makes you question if morning will ever come. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. The house was silent, no creaks or groans from the old wood. Then I realized I couldn't move. It was like something heavy was pressing down on me, pinning me to the mattress. I tried to lift my arms, my legs, even just a finger, but nothing happened. My breath came fast and shallow. I told myself it was sleep paralysis. That's all it was, just my brain waking up before my body. I'd read about it before. It was normal. Then I felt it, a presence, standing next to the bed. I couldn't see anything at first. My eyes were adjusting to the dark, and my heart was hammering so loud I thought it might shake the bed. But I knew something was there. I could feel it, the way you can feel when someone is too close to you, even if you can't see them. Then I saw him, a boy, standing over me. He wasn't moving, just staring down at me, his face barely visible in the dim light. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to do anything, but I couldn't. My body was still frozen. My mind was screaming at me to wake up, to move, to do something. But all I could do was stare back at him. Then he leaned in. His face got closer, just inches from mine. I could see his eyes now, wide and dark, like he was studying me. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then he reached for me. The second his hand touched my shoulder, I snapped awake. I bolted upright, gasping, my heart slamming against my ribs. The room was empty. No boy, no shadow. Just me, alone in the dark. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was just a nightmare, a bad dream fueled by my aunt's story. I even laughed a little, shaky and breathless. Then I noticed the bed. It wasn't in the same place. It had moved. Not by much, but enough. Enough that I knew I hadn't imagined it. The heavy wooden frame, the kind that would take 2 people to lift, had shifted at least a foot away from the wall. I sat there staring at it, my skin crawling. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone to check the time. 3:12 a.m. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I just sat there, watching the room until the sun finally came up. When my aunt found me in the morning, sitting on the edge of the bed, pale and exhausted, she didn't say anything. Just gave me a knowing look. I didn't tell her what happened. I didn't need to. She already knew. But I'll never forget the weight of that hand on my shoulder, or the way the bed wasn't where I left it. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I believe in that boy. Story 7. I live in a quiet suburb, nothing fancy, just rows of houses that all look the same. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. That's why I still don't know how to explain what happened that afternoon. It was just a normal day. I got off work a little early, around 2 p.m., came home, kicked my shoes off by the door, and tossed my keys on the kitchen counter. Nobody else was home. My parents weren't due back from work until 4, and my sister was at school. I liked this part of the day. Coming home to an empty house, unwinding, just existing for a little while before the noise of family life kicked in. The first thing I did, like usual, was head to the bathroom. I won't sugarcoat it. I take my time when I'm in there. It's my personal ritual. Sit down, browse Reddit, scroll mindlessly until my legs start to go numb. And since I was alone, I left the door open. Because why the hell not? I had only been sitting there for a couple of minutes when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the laundry room door opening. It's a heavy door, old wood, and it sticks to the frame. You have to yank it open, and when it closes, it doesn't just shut, it slams. That's exactly what I heard. A hard, echoing slam. I froze. My first thought was that someone had come home early. Maybe my sister had left school for some reason. Maybe my dad's job let him off early. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I frowned and reached out to push the bathroom door closed. If someone was home, they didn't need to walk in and see me mid-shit, but something about the silence on the other end of the house made me feel uneasy. Usually, if my dad came home, he'd be on the phone, listening to one of his audiobooks, shuffling around the kitchen. My sister would be loud as hell, dropping her bag, opening the fridge, complaining about her day. But there was nothing, just silence. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not rushed or casual, just steady. Someone walking from the laundry room into the living room. Then they stopped. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. "Dad?" Silence. I wiped hurriedly, yanked my pants up, and stepped out of the bathroom, my heart pounding in my ears. The living room was empty. I walked in expecting to see someone, anyone, but it was just me. I called out again, louder this time. "Hello, who's here?" Nothing. The house felt wrong. You ever get that sensation, like the air is thicker, like something is just off? I felt it then, pressing down on my chest, making my skin crawl. I walked toward the laundry room, half expecting to see the door wide open. Maybe the wind had caught it somehow, but it was shut, closed tight, just like I had left it. I reached out, hesitant, and touched the doorknob. It was cold, too cold, like it had just come out of a freezer. My stomach twisted. I slowly turned it and pulled the door open. The laundry room was empty, nothing out of place. The washer and dryer were silent. The shelves were stocked with detergent, cleaning supplies, everything normal. But I knew what I had heard. I stepped back into the living room, my breath coming a little faster. I walked to the front door and swung it open, stepping outside. The driveway was empty except for my car. No other vehicles, no signs of anyone. Just the quiet hum of the neighborhood. That was when the fear hit me. I mean real fear. The kind that grips you, makes your body go cold, makes your instincts scream at you to run. I don't know why, but I bolted back inside and sat down on the couch. I just sat there, staring at the hallway, waiting for something to happen. I don't know what I expected. Another sound, another footstep, something. But nothing came. The house was silent again. Just me and my thoughts, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stayed like that for what felt like forever. Eventually, I got up and went back to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed, trying to convince myself that maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I had been too deep in my phone, and my brain had played a trick on me. But I knew better. Because when my parents finally came home that evening, I asked them both, casually trying to keep my voice steady, if either of them had come home early that day. They both said no. I never heard that door open and close again. Story 8. I was 17 when this happened. My uncle used to throw me a few bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They had a nice 2-story house near the water, quiet neighborhood, not the kind of place you'd expect anything weird to happen. The kids were little. One was 3, the other 6. I watched them plenty of times and nothing ever felt off. Not until that night. It was late afternoon, maybe pushing early evening. My aunt was outside playing with the kids, and I was inside, just hanging out in the den. Nothing special, just scrolling through my phone, waiting to be needed. That's when I heard it, a baby crying. At first, I barely noticed it. I just assumed it was the 3-year-old, maybe waking up from a nap. The sound was faint but getting clearer, coming from upstairs. My aunt had to be up there with him, I figured, so I called out, "Hey, you got him?" No response. The crying kept going, steady, almost rhythmic. I called again, louder this time. "Hey, everything good?" Still nothing, just that crying. I got up and walked toward the stairs. The way their house was set up, the den was right near the bottom of the staircase, so I didn't have far to go. As I reached the first step, I hesitated. Something about the sound wasn't right. It was off, not like a normal baby cry. Too consistent, too deliberate, but I shook it off. Kids cry, right? I started walking up. Halfway up the stairs, I called for my aunt again. "Hello?" Nothing. The crying was definitely coming from one of the rooms at the end of the hallway. The 3-year-old's room, I thought. But something gnawed at me. I hadn't seen my aunt go upstairs. She had been outside. I was sure of it. A cold wave washed over me, and I stopped on the stairs. My heart was pounding now, my breathing a little shallow. Something was wrong. I turned my head slowly toward the back door, the one that led to the yard. The blinds were open, and through the glass I saw them, my aunt, my little cousins, outside, playing. My stomach dropped. The crying was still coming from upstairs. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My brain was scrambling, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe the window was open, and it was coming from a neighbor's house. But no, that wasn't it. It was coming from inside the house, from that room, right at the end of the hallway. And then it stopped. Dead silence. That was worse. I turned on my heel and walked down the stairs. Not fast, not running, just controlled, careful steps, like I didn't want to let whatever was up there know that I knew. The second my feet hit the bottom, I grabbed my keys off the counter. I didn't even put my shoes on. I didn't stop to think. I walked straight to the front door, opened it, stepped outside, and pulled it shut behind me. I could still hear the crying from inside the house. I got in my car, started the engine with shaking hands, and backed out of the driveway. I didn't stop until I was a few blocks away. Then I pulled over, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it. There was no baby upstairs. My cousins were outside the whole time. My aunt was outside the whole time. I knew what I heard. I knew it wasn't them. And that silence, the way it just stopped when I realized, no, I didn't go back. I didn't text my aunt. I didn't call. I couldn't. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead of me, trying to push down the ice-cold fear creeping up my spine. I never babysat there again. Story 9. I was 9, maybe 10, when I got invited to a sleepover at my friend Joey's house. I remember not really wanting to go. His neighborhood was bad. Run-down houses, cars with missing tires just sitting in the yard, streetlights that barely worked. My mom wasn't thrilled about it either, but Joey and I had been friends for a while, and she didn't want to say no. She just told me to be careful and that she'd pick me up in the morning. When I got there, it was worse than I expected. Joey's house was small, the kind of place where you could hear everything happening in every room. His parents weren't really paying attention to us. His mom was watching TV in the living room, and his dad was out. The plan, Joey said, was for us to sleep outside in a tent. That didn't sit right with me, but all the other kids, 4 of us in total, thought it was the coolest thing ever. The tent was set up in the backyard, right against the chain-link fence that separated Joey's house from the alley. The alley was dark, the kind of dark that made it seem like something could be standing there just watching, and you wouldn't know. The tent itself was old, smelling like mildew and plastic, with a single flashlight in the middle. We played cards for a while, told jokes, and eventually, one by one, everyone fell asleep. I tried to stay awake, but the cold and the quiet got to me, and I must have dozed off. I woke up to silence, that kind of silence where it feels like even the air is holding its breath. My first thought was that I was freezing. My second thought was that I was alone. The tent was empty. Joey, the other kids, gone. The flashlight, still on, cast weird shadows against the nylon. My stomach dropped. I sat up and listened. Nothing. Not even the sound of cars from the main road. It was too quiet. I unzipped the tent and peeked outside. The yard was empty. No sign of Joey, no sign of anyone. The back porch light was still on, casting a dim glow over the patchy grass. But beyond that, just blackness. The alley was silent. The neighboring houses looked like abandoned shells, their windows dark. I whispered, "Joey?" Nothing. The cold made my teeth chatter. I stepped out of the tent, my bare feet sinking into the wet grass. My pajamas weren't enough against the chill, and I hugged myself as I scanned the yard. It didn't make sense. Where did everyone go? I walked toward the house. The back door was slightly open, moving just a little in the breeze. "Joey!" I called again, stepping inside. The house was dark, too dark. The TV, which had been on earlier, was off now. The air inside felt thick, stale. The hallway stretched ahead of me, disappearing into shadows. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. I checked Joey's room. The bed was unmade, his clothes and toys scattered around, but no Joey, no sign of his mom either. I stepped back, my breathing loud in my ears. "Hello!" I called out, louder this time. My voice felt small, swallowed by the house. No answer. My skin prickled with something I couldn't explain. I don't know why, but I walked to the front door. Maybe I thought they were playing a prank on me, hiding outside. But when I turned the knob, the door swung open without resistance. It wasn't locked. The street was empty. No people, no cars. The air felt thick, heavy. I could feel something watching me. I don't know how, but I could. The pressure of unseen eyes pressing against my skin. My breath caught in my throat. I turned back into the house. My heart was pounding. Something was wrong. Something was really, really wrong. Then I heard it. A sound from down the hall. A shuffle, like something dragging along the floor. Slow, deliberate. I froze. My whole body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Another sound, closer now. A creak, like someone shifting their weight. "Joey?" My voice barely came out. No answer. And then the worst sound of all. Breathing. Not mine. Slow, raspy breathing. Just past the doorway, deep in the dark hall. I backed away, heart hammering. My legs felt numb. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The breathing got louder. A shadow moved in the darkness. Not a person, not Joey. Something else. Something too tall, too thin, its head tilting in that unnatural way like it was listening. I turned and ran. I don't remember how I found the phone. I don't remember dialing. But suddenly I was gripping the receiver with both hands, my fingers digging into the plastic as I whispered, "Mom, come get me. Now." She must have heard something in my voice because she didn't ask questions. Just said, "I'm coming." I hung up and backed into the corner of the kitchen, my eyes locked on the dark hallway. The breathing had stopped. The house was silent again, but I knew it was still there, waiting, watching. The minutes crawled by. I kept my eyes on the front door, waiting for my mom's headlights, for any sign of movement outside. Then finally I saw them. The beams of her car cut through the dark, washing over the front yard. The sight of it nearly made me collapse. I didn't hesitate. I ran for the door, flung it open, and sprinted to the car. The second I was inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My mom turned to look at me, her face creased with worry. "What happened?" she asked. I couldn't answer. I just shook my head. She put the car in reverse, and as we pulled away, I looked back at the house. The front door was still open. The inside was dark. And then, just for a second, I thought I saw something step back into the shadows. I never talked to Joey again. Never asked him what happened that night. I don't know if I even wanted to know. Story 10. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors until the late 90s. My house was old, probably built in the 1920s, one of those narrow two-story homes with a basement apartment that had its own entrance. My bedroom was just off the front entryway, so I could hear anytime someone came in or left. One evening, my friend Jake was over. We were just hanging out in my room playing video games when we heard the front door open. We both glanced up because it wasn't a quiet sound. The door had that old wood creak, and the latch always clicked loudly when it shut. Then we saw someone walk in. It was quick, just a dark figure moving past the doorway, heading toward the basement stairs. Neither of us got a good look at them, but we both saw them. Jake even went, "Oh, your tenant's home." That made sense. The basement apartment was rented out, though I didn't know my tenant's schedule that well. Still, something felt off. I didn't hear any footsteps on the basement stairs. Usually the steps creaked under even the lightest weight, but this time, nothing. Just the front door, the quick blur of movement, then silence. A few minutes passed. Jake and I were back in the game, but my mind kept circling back to what we'd seen. Something was bothering me. Finally, I paused the game and stood up. I just realized his car isn't in the driveway. Jake frowned. "Maybe someone dropped him off?" "Maybe," I said, but I wasn't convinced. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The driveway was empty. My tenant always parked right up against the house, and it wasn't like he went anywhere without his car. I turned back to Jake, my stomach tightening. There's no way that was him. Jake exhaled, setting the controller down. All right, let's check. We walked out of my room, through the entryway, into the basement door. I reached for the handle and hesitated. The air felt wrong. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and someone's just been fighting? That thick, tense pressure in the air? It was like that. My arms felt cold. I twisted the handle and pushed the door open. The basement stairs stretched down into darkness. The light switch was at the bottom. Jake whispered, "Dude." But I was already stepping forward. I wasn't thinking about ghosts or anything like that. I was thinking about an actual person, an intruder. Maybe some neighbor who thought they could hide out in my basement. The stairs creaked under my weight. Jake followed close behind. The only light came from the glow of my bedroom behind us, casting long shadows down the steps. The basement smelled like old wood and damp concrete. Halfway down, my foot hit something. I looked down. A single shoe lay on the step, tipped onto its side. My tenant's shoe. Jake muttered, "What the hell?" I stepped around it and reached the bottom. It was completely silent. The air was heavy, almost too thick to breathe. I reached for the light switch, flicked it up. Nothing. Jake swore. "Bulbs out?" I shook my head. That wasn't right. I had been down here earlier, checking the laundry. The light worked fine. Something moved in the dark. I heard it, just a small shift, like fabric brushing against something. It came from the far corner, where the tenant's small couch sat. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. Someone or something was there. Then came the breathing. Long, slow, ragged inhales. Not normal breathing, but something deliberate, almost testing the air. It sent a bolt of ice through my chest. Jake grabbed my arm. "We need to go." I nodded, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted in place. I was staring into that pitch-black corner, knowing something was there but unable to see it. And then, the breathing stopped. Silence. Thick, pressing silence. Then, a rush of movement. I didn't see it, but I felt it. A burst of air, a shift in the darkness. Something was coming straight at us. We bolted. I didn't think, I just ran. Jake was ahead of me, practically throwing himself up the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut behind us and locked it. For a long time, we just stood there panting. I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. Just silence. Jake wiped his face. "What the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. I just shook my head. After a moment, we did something incredibly stupid. We checked every door and window in the house. Everything was locked. The front door, the back door, the windows, even the basement door leading outside. No one could have gotten in. No one could have left. The house was empty, but we had both seen someone walk in. Neither of us slept that night. I don't know what we saw. I don't know what was breathing in that basement. But I do know one thing. Something else was in my house that night. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear. Story 1. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people leave their doors unlocked and everyone knows each other's business. My parents had bought the house when I was 5, and by the time I was old enough to understand things, I already knew. Something was wrong with it. It wasn't an old house, nothing historic or gothic, just a regular split level built in the late 70s, with beige siding and a backyard that butted up against a thin line of woods. But there was something in it. You could feel it. A weight in the air, something in the corners of the rooms where the light didn't reach. My dad wasn't a superstitious man, but even he admitted the place felt heavy sometimes. We kept a lamp on in the living room at night. Always. My mom insisted on it. Said it made her feel better. Said that some nights, if she woke up to get a glass of water, she'd glance down the hallway and swear she saw someone standing there, just outside the reach of the light. She never said that part in front of my dad. I was 17 when it happened. It was a Saturday night, late, past 1 in the morning. I had just gotten home from my friend Nick's house. We'd been playing video games, bullshitting about school, talking about girls, normal shit. The drive back was maybe 10 minutes, and when I pulled into the driveway, everything looked normal. The glow from the living room lamp was spilling through the curtains like always. I stepped inside, locked up behind me, and headed straight for the kitchen to grab a soda before heading to bed. The house was quiet. My parents had already turned in for the night. And then as I was closing the fridge, I heard it. A soft pop. Not a loud noise. Not dramatic. Just this small, almost wet pop, like a bottle being uncorked. It came from the living room. I froze. Just for a second. My brain ran through possibilities. Maybe the bulb burned out? Maybe it was already flickering when I came in and I just hadn't noticed. But then I saw something in the corner of my eye. Something moving. I turned my head just as the light bulb hit the floor. Not fell. Hit. I stood there gripping the soda can, heart hammering, staring at the light bulb rolling in a slow circle on the carpet. It was still intact, but the living room was dark. Completely dark. I hesitated, then took a slow step forward, trying to let my eyes adjust. The only light now was from the microwave clock and a faint orange glow from the street lamp outside. It took a second for me to see it. The lamp was still there, standing in the corner. But something was wrong with the socket. I swallowed hard and took another step. And that's when I saw it. The metal base of the bulb was still in the socket, ripped clean in half. My stomach flipped. My breath got tight in my chest. I don't know if you've ever seen a light bulb break like that, but it doesn't just happen. You unscrew a bulb. If it shatters, it does it all at once. Glass, filament, everything. But something had ripped it out. Not twisted, torn. The edges of the metal looked shredded, like whatever did it had clawed it out. I took a step back, my body moving before my brain did. My heart was slamming against my ribs now. My ears were ringing, and then the air changed. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like the air pressure in the room dropped, like when you drive up into the mountains too fast and your ears start popping. A deep, suffocating silence swallowed the room. The hairs on my arms lifted. I wasn't alone. I knew it. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, but I knew. Something was in that room with me. I couldn't move. I didn't want to. It felt like if I did, if I even breathed too loud, it would hear me. And then, just past the glow of the microwave clock, I saw movement. A shadow. Tall. Still. Watching. I took another step back, and as I did, the floor creaked. And whatever was standing there moved. I didn't think. I didn't process. I ran. I sprinted down the hall to my room, slamming the door shut behind me so hard the whole frame shook. My breath was coming in fast, sharp bursts. My hands were shaking. And then, something moved in the hallway. I heard it. A slow, deliberate shift of weight. A step, and then another, coming closer. I pressed my back against the door, squeezing my eyes shut. I don't know how long I stood there. 5 minutes? 10? Then, nothing. Silence. I cracked my eyes open, listened. Nothing. I don't know how long I stayed awake that night. I just remember sitting on my bed, staring at the door, too afraid to move. At some point, exhaustion won. I must have passed out. By morning, it was like nothing had happened. But when I finally got the nerve to go back into the living room, the bulb was still there, right where I had seen it. The metal was still mangled in the socket. I showed my dad. He frowned, confused. "Huh," he muttered, reaching for the lamp. "Never seen that happen before." I just stood there staring at him. He twisted the metal out with pliers, tossed it in the trash, and screwed in a new bulb like it was nothing. The light came back on, warm and steady. That should have been the end of it. But then he said something that still makes my skin crawl. He glanced at me, expression unreadable. Then almost offhandedly, he muttered, "Guess it didn't like that light being on." And then he walked away, like he already knew. Story 2. We'd lived in that house for 8 years before she died in it. A quiet suburban place. Not old, not haunted. Just a normal home where we raised our kids, paid our bills, and went about life like everyone else. Then one afternoon, my mother-in-law collapsed in our living room. My wife, a physician, was home with the kids when it happened. A massive pulmonary embolism. She hit the floor without a sound. My wife did CPR all the way to the hospital. It didn't matter. She was gone. Just like that. I wasn't there. I was in class when it happened. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already cold. My wife looked exhausted, broken in a way I'd never seen. Our kids, God, they were just standing there, quiet and confused, trying to understand why Grandma wasn't waking up. The house felt different when we came home. Too quiet, too still. The air seemed heavy, like something thick had settled into the walls. The first night back, I kept waking up, feeling like someone was standing in the doorway. I'd jolt upright, expecting to see my wife or one of the kids. But no one was ever there. A week after the funeral, I was home alone. It was a little before 4 in the afternoon, right when the kids' school bus was due to pull up the street. My wife was at work. The house was empty except for me. I had a basket of laundry on the couch and was folding shirts, trying to keep busy. And then it happened. The sound hit me like a wall. Birds. Thousands of them. It was deafening, a swirling, shrieking cacophony, as if every bird in the world had crammed itself inside my house and was flapping, screaming, cawing, chirping. Every possible bird sound, all at once, blasting through the walls. I dropped a shirt. My brain tried to make sense of it. The TV, I thought. The kids must have come in without me hearing them and cranked the volume up. "Turn it down, now!" I shouted. The second the words left my mouth, the sound stopped. Not faded, not dimmed. Stopped. Like a switch had been flipped. The silence that followed was almost worse. My ears rang from the sudden absence of sound. I stood there, frozen, my hands still half raised from where I'd been holding the laundry. I listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No TV. No movement anywhere in the house. I swallowed. Kids? No answer. I moved toward the hallway, feeling stupid for the way my hands were shaking. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was just on edge. It had been a rough week, after all. And then I heard the front door unlock. I turned just in time to see the knob twist and the door swing open. And there they were, my kids, all 4 of them, stepping inside, still in their school uniforms, backpacks slung over their shoulders. I stared at them. My mouth opened, but no words came out. They stopped when they saw me. Hey, my oldest said, giving me a weird look. I turned my head, looking past them. Down the street, the school bus was still pulling away. They had just gotten home, which meant my stomach lurched, my skin went cold. I took a slow step back, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What's wrong?" my youngest asked. I swallowed. I forced myself to look around the house, forcing myself to believe what I already knew. There was no TV on, no birds, no one else inside, just me, and whatever had been here before the kids got home. I forced a smile, shook my head. "Nothing," I lied. "I just thought I heard something." I never told them, never told my wife, but that was the last time I was ever alone in that house. Story 3. I live alone in a small rental house in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Louisville. It's nothing fancy, just a 1-story, 2-bedroom place with an old, creaky kitchen that hasn't been updated since the 80s. Wood paneling, linoleum floors, cabinets that don't close all the way. The kind of place you rent because it's cheap, not because you love it. I'd been there for about 6 months, and it always felt fine. Not great, not bad, just fine. The only thing that ever really bothered me was the kitchen. Something about it always made me uneasy. Maybe it was the dim yellow light from the outdated fixture, or the way the floor always seemed a little too cold, even in the summer. But I never had a reason to be afraid. Not until that night. It was late, maybe 11 or so. I just finished cleaning up the living room and was about to head to bed when I realized I hadn't put my cup in the sink. I walked into the kitchen, set it down, and turned to leave. That's when the toaster clicked. I froze. It was an old stainless steel toaster, the kind with a dial on the side and a manual lever. It had been unplugged all day. I was sure of it. I don't leave appliances plugged in unless I'm using them. I took a slow step toward it, and before I could process what was happening, the kettle flipped on. The electric kettle, sitting right next to the toaster, clicked to life. Its little red indicator light glowed. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't touched either of them. I was standing across the room when it happened. My breath caught in my throat. The kitchen was silent except for the low hum of the kettle heating up. I forced myself to move, reaching for the plug. My fingers wrapped around the cord, ice cold. I yanked it from the wall, and the kettle went dead. The little red light blinked out. I didn't even have time to feel relieved before the toaster popped. Loud, violent. Like something had been launched out of it, but nothing came out. I stood there staring at it, my hand still gripping the kettle's cord. My brain was scrambling for an explanation. Maybe there was some kind of electrical short. Maybe. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the microwave door, something standing behind me. A shape. Dark. Tall. It didn't have features, just a shadow where a person should be. I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then right next to my ear, so close I swear I felt breath, came a voice. Not a whisper, not a growl, just one word. Stay! I ran. I didn't even think about it. My body just reacted. I bolted out of the kitchen, through the living room, straight to the front door. I didn't stop until I was outside, standing barefoot on the cold concrete of my porch. The house behind me was silent. I stood there for what felt like forever, my breath sharp in my chest. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. After a while, I forced myself to look back at the house. The kitchen window was dark. Nothing moved. I told myself it was in my head, a trick of the light. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the appliances were just malfunctioning. But I didn't go back inside, not that night. And when I did finally go back in the next morning, I unplugged the toaster and the kettle and stuffed them in a box. I never used them again. And I never stepped into that kitchen after dark. Not once. Story 4. I work nights, always have. Something about the quiet suits me. No traffic, no people breathing down my neck. Just me, a job, and the satisfaction of working alone. This warehouse gig was no different. Big empty building, dim industrial lights buzzing overhead, and the occasional groan of metal settling in the rafters. I liked it. It was an old shipping and receiving warehouse, mostly abandoned for years before a new company bought it and decided to turn part of it into an office space. That was my job. The crew had already come and gone, framing up the basic structure, but the next step was securing everything to the concrete floor. And for that, I needed a shot shell hammer. For those who don't know, a shot shell hammer is a tool that fires a .22 caliber blank to drive nails straight into concrete. It's loud, powerful, and not something you want to mess around with. I was careful with it, double-checked everything. I knew I was alone. The crew left an hour before. I locked the doors behind them myself. This wasn't a building where people just walked in and out. It was a controlled site, and I had the only keys. Just me, my work, and nothing else. Or at least that's what I thought. I was kneeling on the concrete, lining up the first nail, my hand steady on the trigger. One sharp pull, and the nail would drive straight through the 2x4 into the slab beneath it. I braced myself for the bang, and then something stuck a finger in my ear. Full-on, wet, wriggling finger. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't sweat. It was a finger. I felt the skin, the warmth, the pressure of the knuckle as it pushed inside. It wriggled. I recoiled so fast I nearly put a hole in my own damn foot. The hammer clattered to the floor, my hand slapping at my ear, my whole body twisting away from whatever the hell had just touched me. I shot up to my feet, heart slamming against my ribs. Hello? My own voice sounded strange in the empty space, swallowed up by all that concrete and steel. Nothing. I spun, scanning the warehouse. The long rows of shelving stood empty, stretching into the darkness at the far end of the building, where the lights didn't quite reach. There were no windows, just thick metal roll-up doors and heavy-duty locks. I was alone. I had to be alone. But that didn't just happen by itself. I turned in circles, my breath coming fast, trying to make sense of it. The sensation was still there, lingering, moist inside my ear canal, like I could still feel the damn thing wriggling against my skin. I wiped at it furiously, my fingers coming away dry. No wind, no bugs, no explanation, nothing. But I felt it. I felt the heat of that finger. I felt it push inside. I backed up step by step, my eyes darting around, trying to find something, anything that made sense. A prank? Number no one else was here. And even if someone had slipped in somehow, how the hell would they have gotten close enough to do that? I would have heard them. I would have seen them. I stood there, my breath shaking, every nerve in my body waiting for something to move. A shadow, a sound, anything. But there was nothing. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. The silence wasn't normal anymore. It wasn't just empty, it was waiting. I swallowed, forced myself to move. I picked up the hammer, my hands still unsteady, and tried to convince myself I was just imagining things. Maybe I brushed my own ear by accident. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe. But I knew. I knew what I felt. And I knew I wasn't alone. I left. Story 5. I don't tell this story often, because every time I do, I feel like I'm going crazy. I've played it over in my head more times than I can count, trying to find the logical explanation, the thing I must have missed. But there isn't one. This happened about 2 years ago. I had taken my kids to a coal mining museum, one of those open-air ones where they preserve the old buildings and machinery. It was a cool gray afternoon, the kind of day that makes everything feel a little quieter, a little heavier. I remember my kids running ahead, their little boots clomping on the gravel path. They were hyped up, as kids always are when there are buttons to push and things to climb on. I was just trying to keep up, glancing at the signs, half reading about the history, while also making sure no one wiped out on the uneven ground. We wandered through a few old buildings, most of them set up like they used to be, a general store, an old office, a barracks for the miners. The kids weren't too interested in those. Then we came to a small, weathered building off to the side, separate from the others. It had a sign above the door that said engine house. Through the big front window, I could see it had some kind of machinery inside, plus a few display cases with old mining tools. And I saw him. A man stood near the back, facing one of the exhibits. He was dressed normally. Jeans, a dark jacket. Something about the way he stood made me assume he worked there. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't moving around like a visitor would. He was just standing there, staring at the display. I figured we'd wait for him to finish. I had 2 very excited toddlers with me, and a confined space with delicate exhibits didn't seem like the best place to let them loose while someone was trying to read. So we waited. The kids got antsy almost immediately. I distracted them as best as I could, pointing out a big piece of rusted machinery nearby, telling them to count the birds in the trees. But all the while I kept an eye on the door, waiting for the man to come out. He didn't. I remember shifting my weight from foot to foot, checking the window again. He was still there. Same position, same posture, just standing, not moving. A weird feeling crept up my spine. The building wasn't big. 1 door, 1 room. No way out except past us. "All right, let's go in," I said finally, taking my kids' hands. The door was old and heavy. It groaned as I pulled it open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and damp wood. My kids darted forward instantly, going straight for the buttons on the display panels. But the man was gone. I turned in a slow circle, my stomach tightening. The room was empty. There wasn't a back door. There weren't any partitions, no little hidden corners. Just 4 walls, a few machines, and us. I know what I saw. He had been there, standing still. I had watched him for at least 5 full minutes. There was no way he had left without me seeing. No way. I felt my pulse in my throat. My kids didn't notice anything was wrong. They were too busy pressing buttons and making the exhibits beep and whir. But I just stood there, scanning every inch of the room, my skin crawling. The only sound was the hum of an old light fixture overhead, flickering slightly. I walked toward the back of the room, the spot where the man had been standing. Nothing there. just a display case with rusted mining helmets and a few faded photographs of workers from a century ago. I turned back to the window, retracing the sightline. From where I had been standing outside, I had a perfect view of the entire room. There was no place to hide. I suddenly felt cold. My scalp tingle, like something was pressing in around me, just outside my field of vision. I needed to get out. "All right, time to go," I said, my voice too loud. My kids groaned but didn't argue. We stepped back outside into the damp air. I turned to look through the window one last time. The room was still empty. But for the briefest moment, just a fraction of a second, I saw something move. Not in the room, in the reflection on the glass. Behind me. I whipped around so fast I almost lost my balance, grabbing onto my kids' shoulders. Nothing. Just the gravel path, the empty buildings, the overcast sky. My heart was slamming against my ribs. My skin was tight with goosebumps. I gripped my kids' hands and walked fast, too fast, back toward the main museum building. My head was spinning. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that the light had played tricks on me, that maybe somehow I had missed the man leaving. But I knew that wasn't true. I had been right there. I hadn't looked away, and he had never walked out. I don't have an explanation. Story 6. I grew up in a small town where people like to hold on to things. Antique stores lined the main road, full of old furniture, dusty trinkets, and whatever else people thought had value. My mom loved that kind of thing, always going to estate sales and auctions, picking up things she just couldn't pass up. Most of the time it was harmless. Until that winter. It was early January, the kind of cold that makes the air feel heavy, like everything outside is frozen in place. We lived in an old house, 2 floors, long hallway, creaky floors. It had been in our family for years, and though it needed work, it was home. My mom had been on a kick about redoing her bedroom, wanting it to have a more classic feel. She went to an auction one weekend and came back with an antique bed frame. Dark wood, high headboard, old-fashioned carvings. She was excited about it, said she got it for next to nothing. I remember her setting it against the wall in her room, waiting for my dad to help put it together once the renovations were done. She kept running her hand along the wood, talking about how sturdy it was, how they didn't make furniture like this anymore. I didn't really think much of it. It was just a bed frame. That night I was in my room, lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone. My parents were in the living room, watching TV, their usual evening routine. The house was quiet except for the hum of the television and the occasional creak of the furnace kicking on. Then out of nowhere, the whole house shook. A door slammed so hard I felt the vibration through my mattress. It wasn't just a regular door closing. This was violent, like someone had thrown their whole weight into it. The walls trembled. The sound echoed down the hallway, cutting through the quiet like a gunshot. My heart jumped into my throat. I sat up fast, staring at my bedroom door. For a few seconds, everything was still. Too still. Then I heard the frantic sound of paws on wood, our cats scattering, claws scratching against the floor as they bolted out of the hallway. From the living room, my mom yelled, "What the hell was that?" I swung my legs over the bed and hesitated before stepping out into the hallway. My parents were already moving, my dad leading the way. We all knew where the sound had come from. My mom's room. The door, which had been open earlier, was now shut. Not just closed, slammed shut with enough force to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I don't know why, but I felt sick looking at it. Did one of the cats? My mom's voice trailed off. She already knew the answer. There was no way one of our cats could have done that. My dad reached for the doorknob and twisted it. The door opened easily. No resistance. No lock engaged. He flicked on the light. Nothing. The bed frame was still propped against the wall. The room was the same as it had been that afternoon. No windows open, no furniture tipped over, nothing on the floor. No explanation. The 3 of us stood there staring into the empty room. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees, even though the vents were blowing warm air. My dad checked the windows. Locked. No wind outside. Our garage was shut, and the main doors were all locked. There was no one else in the house. No logical reason for what had happened. Then my mom said, almost to herself, I don't like it. My dad exhaled through his nose, one of those sharp exhales he does when he's frustrated but doesn't want to say anything. He stepped back and looked at the door, then at the frame, like he was trying to figure out if maybe the house had shifted. Maybe a pressure change, he muttered. Or, no, my mom cut him off. She was staring at the bed frame now. I don't know how to explain it, but the room didn't feel like ours anymore. Like we were standing in someone else's space. Someone who didn't want us there. The feeling crawled up my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I don't want it in here, my mom said, still looking at the bed frame. My dad hesitated, then sighed and rubbed his face. Jesus, all right, I'll move it. That night, he dragged it out of the house and put it in the garage. The next day, my mom listed it for sale. She didn't ask for much, just enough to get rid of it. Some guy came by in a pickup truck, barely looked at it before handing over the money and loading it up. She never bought another antique bed frame after that. Story 7. I've lived in this house my whole life. It's not big, not fancy, just an old house sitting at the edge of town. The kind of place that's been passed down through generations. I guess you could say I'm used to it, used to its creaks and groans. The way the walls settle at night, the occasional cold spots that don't make sense. You live somewhere long enough, you stop questioning things. But every now and then, something happens that reminds you. This house isn't just old, it's haunted. It was a Saturday. My mom was in one of her organizing moods, digging through old documents in the dining room, surrounded by stacks of yellowed papers and dusty folders. I wasn't paying much attention, just another weekend. I was in the living room, half watching TV, scrolling through my phone, letting the sound of papers shuffling and my mom mumbling to herself blend into the background. Then she said, "Well, would you look at this?" I glanced over. She was holding up a brittle piece of paper, smiling in that way she does when she finds something interesting. This is the original deed to the house, from the 1920s. Crazy, right? I nodded, gave a non-committal, "Yeah, cool," and went back to my phone. But she kept going, reading off names of old family members, people who'd lived and died here long before we were even thought of. Your great-great-uncle Joseph. Oh, he passed away in the house. So did his wife. And their son, Richard. I don't know why, but I didn't like hearing that. The names felt too close, too heavy. I shifted in my seat, suddenly uncomfortable. Eventually, she got tired and left the papers on the dining table. I went about my night like normal. Dinner, shower, TV. Nothing felt off. Until the door opened. It was late, past midnight. I was in the living room, lights dim, TV volume low. My mom had already gone to bed. The house was quiet. And then, beep, beep, beep. The alarm system screamed through the silence. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I shot up, adrenaline slamming through me. The screen on the wall lit up. Porch door open. That didn't make sense. The porch door stays locked, always. It's a heavy old wooden door with a deadbolt that sticks. You have to put your weight into opening it. It doesn't just open on its own. I grabbed my phone, flipped on the flashlight, and crept toward the dining room, my pulse hammering. The house felt wrong. I don't know how to explain it. It was like the air had thickened, pressing down on me. The shadows stretched longer than they should have, the corners darker than they were supposed to be. And then I saw it. The porch door was wide open, not cracked, not swinging, wide open. My breath caught in my throat. Something was standing on the porch. I couldn't see its face, couldn't even make out a shape at first, just something. A presence, like the air was shifting, bending around something that shouldn't be there. Then, movement. It stepped forward. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to get out, to do something. But I was frozen, locked in place as my flashlight beam trembled over the empty doorway. The thing on the porch, it wasn't right. It was tall, but not in a normal way. Its limbs seemed wrong, too long, like they stretched beyond where they should have ended. And its head, God, its head, it tilted, just slightly, like it was watching me. It didn't have a face, at least not one I could see. just a shape, a void where a face should have been. Then it moved again. Not a step, not a normal movement. It just shifted, like the space around it warped, like reality itself struggled to hold it in place. The air turned ice cold. And then, slam! The door slammed shut so hard the walls shook. I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I thought I was dying. The alarm was still screaming, my flashlight flickering in my shaking hand. I scrambled for the lock, twisting the deadbolt with trembling fingers. It clicked into place. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I didn't check outside. I didn't want to. I backed away, chest heaving, eyes locked on the door, like it might burst open again at any second. But nothing happened. Just silence. Story. 8. I work in a pub, old place, been around since the early 1800s. It's got that kind of history that comes with whispers, stories from the older regulars about things moving on their own, glasses shattering in empty rooms, voices where there shouldn't be any. I never paid much attention. Places with history get stories. That's just how it is. The basement bar, though, now that's a different thing. It's where we store most of the kegs and extra stock, and it only opens for private events or during really busy weekends. The ceilings are low, the air's damp, and it always smells like old beer no matter how much we clean. There's something off about it, something heavy. Even when you're alone, it feels like you're not. I used to joke with the others about it, how the stairs down felt longer than they should, how the air seemed to press against your back when you were locking up at night. But I never really believed anything was wrong. Not until 2 weeks ago. It was a normal shift, nothing out of the ordinary. It was a Friday, I think. The pub was packed upstairs, music playing, glasses clinking, people laughing. Downstairs, though, was dead. No events, no extra staff. Just me heading down to get changed before my shift, like I always did. The staff toilet is down there. 2 cubicles, a sink, and a mirror that's too small for the wall it's on. The kind of mirror that makes you avoid looking at it too long. I went into the cubicle, locked the door behind me, pulled out my phone to send a quick text before changing. It was silent. That heavy, pressing kind of silent. The kind that makes your ears ring a little. No humming pipes, no distant chatter from upstairs. Just nothing. Then something hit the door. Hard, not a knock, not someone leaning against it. A full-force slam, loud enough to crack through the silence, hard enough that the lock popped open and the door smashed into my back, shoving me forward. I spun around, ready to throw hands with whoever thought this was funny, because it hurt. I actually felt it. Solid, heavy, like someone had just shoulder barged the door. There was no one there. The cubicle door swung open, creaking on its hinges. The other stall was empty. The main door, still shut. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to make sense of it. The door couldn't have opened like that unless someone had hit it from the outside. But I was the only one downstairs. I was sure of it. I stepped out slowly, my heart hammering, checked under the sink, behind the door. Nothing. The silence pressed in again. I suddenly felt watched, like something was standing just behind me, breathing against my neck. My skin crawled. I didn't get changed, didn't even stay to check for a draft or a loose hinge. I just grabbed my bag, bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, and didn't stop until I was back in the bright, noisy comfort of the main bar. I didn't tell anyone. Not that night anyway. What was I supposed to say? Hey, something invisible just body slammed me in the toilet? I already knew how that would go. Someone would laugh, someone else would start telling ghost stories, and the boss would roll his eyes. But I don't go downstairs alone anymore. And I sure as hell don't get changed down there. Story 9. I used to work overnight shifts at a warehouse. Long hours, mind-numbing work, and a schedule that had me getting home just as the rest of the world was waking up. My day started at sundown and ended around sunrise. It screwed with my body, but I got used to it. That morning, I got home later than usual. The shift had dragged, and by the time I finally stepped through my front door, it was nearly noon. Sunlight was pouring through the windows, way too bright for my tired eyes. The house was quiet, which was how I liked it. My parents were at work, and my younger brother, loud, obnoxious, inconsiderate, was supposed to be at school. I had the place to myself. I locked the front door, shuffled downstairs to the basement, and peeled off my work clothes. My body ached, and my head was fuzzy with exhaustion. Sleep was all I wanted. My bed sat in the corner of the basement, tucked against the wall. I climbed onto the mattress, one knee pressing into the sheets, when I heard it. The garage door, loud and mechanical, rattling open directly above me. I froze. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, stomping up the stairs. My brother. I sighed, already irritated. He had this habit of slamming around like an elephant, no regard for anyone else in the house. What the hell was he doing home? School didn't let out for hours. Maybe he skipped. Again. Then the footsteps hit the hallway. My brother's room was directly over mine, and I could hear them clomping toward it. No hesitation, just a straight march from the garage, up the stairs, down the hall, and into his room. I stayed there, one knee still on the bed, debating whether I should ignore him. But then, voices, muffled but loud enough that I could tell they weren't from a TV or phone speaker. It was conversation, multiple voices, angry. I straightened up. My irritation turned into something sharper, something colder. Who the hell was in my house? I stormed up the stairs, already planning what I was going to say. If he had his dumbass friends over, cutting school and making noise while I was trying to sleep, I was going to lose it. The voices were clearer now. Not just voices, movement, shuffling, a chair scraping across the floor, a dull thump like something hitting the wall. I quickened my pace, rounding the corner into the hallway. The L-shaped layout meant I couldn't see his door until I was almost right on it. My fists were clenched, my jaw locked tight. The voices, so clear just seconds ago, stopped. Completely. No laughter, no talking, no movement. I paused. The house was silent. Something about it made my stomach drop. I took another step forward. The air felt wrong. I pushed open his door. Nothing, no one. His bed was unmade, the sheets half hanging off the side. His desk chair was pushed against the wall, slightly askew. But the room was empty. I stood there, staring. My own breath sounded too loud in my ears. I turned in a slow circle, looking for, what? An explanation. Something to prove I wasn't losing my mind? But there was nothing. I reached out, pressing my palm against his desk. The wood was warm. I don't know why that scared me more than anything else. I backed out of the room, pulling the door shut with shaking fingers. Then I ran, back downstairs. I didn't even bother getting under the covers. I just climbed into bed, yanked the blankets up to my chin, and flicked on the lamp beside me. I don't know how long I lay there, heart pounding, every nerve in my body screaming at me that something was wrong. All I know is that I didn't sleep, and I never heard that garage door close. Story 10, I grew up on 175 acres of mountain land. Nothing but trees, rock, and dirt roads in every direction. Our house was an old two-story place my dad built himself, way up on a ridge, with nothing but the woods behind us. No neighbors close enough to see, no traffic, just the quiet hum of the mountain at night. Sometimes that quiet was peaceful. Other times, it wasn't. I was 17 the night it happened. My parents had gone into town for something, maybe groceries, and left me home alone. I didn't mind. I liked having the house to myself. I made a frozen pizza, sat down in the living room, and flipped on the TV. We had this old ceiling light in the middle of the room, one of those cheap dome ones that collect dust and bugs inside. It gave off a yellowish glow that wasn't great, but it lit the place well enough. I wasn't really paying attention to it, though. I was watching some crime show, eating slices of pizza straight off the plate in my lap. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something flickered, a shadow right under the ceiling light. It moved, just a little, like a ripple in water. My first thought was the TV. The way it lit up the room in flashes, maybe it was causing the shadow to shift. But the ceiling light was on, and that didn't make sense. A light doesn't cast a shadow from itself. I turned my head to look at it directly. The second I did, it stopped. Nothing there. Just the ceiling, the light, the faint, still outline of the fixture. I frowned. Maybe I imagined it. I went back to watching TV. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time I kept my eyes on the screen, trying not to focus on it, but I could still see it moving in my peripheral vision. A strange flickering motion, like something twitching. My stomach tensed up. It didn't feel right. I swallowed and turned to look at it again. And just like before, the second I moved my head, it stopped. I stared at it, waiting. Nothing. The room felt too quiet now. That thick, empty kind of silence where the air itself seems to press in on you. The sound of the TV felt distant, like it was in another room, not right in front of me. I slowly turned back, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. It's nothing, just my imagination. Then it moved again. This time I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes locked on the TV but let them shift just slightly, just enough to see without fully looking. The shadow was flickering. Not like a normal shadow. This was different. It wasn't reacting to the TV's light. It was writhing. That's the only way I can describe it. Like it was alive, like it was struggling. My breath caught in my throat. I stared, barely blinking, barely breathing. And then slowly it started to change. The shadow stretched, grew, spread outward inch by inch, creeping along the ceiling like ink bleeding through paper. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I felt it deep, primal. My body wanted to move, to run, to do anything but sit there. But I couldn't. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe I needed to see. Maybe I needed to prove to myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I turned my head. The instant my eyes landed on it, it stopped. Not like before, not just a flicker. Stopped. Completely. Like it had never moved at all. My stomach turned. A sick, nauseating feeling crawled through my gut, because I knew deep down what had just happened. It wasn't random. It wasn't a trick of the light. It knew I was watching. I sat there frozen. The TV droned on, forgotten. My pizza sat half-eaten on my lap, but I didn't dare move. And then, the worst part, the moment stretched too long. I should have looked away, should have done something, but I didn't. I kept staring, hoping, praying that if I just stared long enough, I'd understand what I was looking at. That's when it twitched. Not like before, not a flicker, not a shift. It twitched, wrong, like a broken thing trying to move, trying to get unstuck. A sharp, unnatural jerk, like something was in there, like something was trying to get out. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears. My hands clenched the couch cushions. My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. And then, without thinking, I did the only thing I could. I turned off the TV. Click. Darkness. The room fell silent. The light from the ceiling burned a harsh yellow. The shadow was still there. I sat completely still, my eyes locked on the ceiling. Nothing moved. And then, click. The light went out. I didn't turn it off. The bulb didn't blow. It just clicked, like someone had flipped the switch. And in that half second before I was swallowed by the dark, I saw it. Not the shadow, not anymore. I saw something else, a shape peeling itself away from the ceiling. Long, spindly limbs stretching downward, unfolding from the darkness like it had been waiting there the whole time. My vision cut out as the light died, and for one single agonizing moment, I sat there in pitch-black silence, knowing I wasn't alone. I don't remember moving. I don't remember running. The next thing I knew, I was outside, standing barefoot on the cold dirt, the porch light blaring behind me. My heart was a wild drum in my chest. My whole body shook. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the front door, too afraid to go back in. My parents got home an hour later. I made up some excuse about needing fresh air. I never told them what I saw, but I never sat alone in that room again. Not at night, not with that light on. Story 1. I was at the grocery store late at night, right before closing. I live in a small town just outside of Lexington, Kentucky, And this store was the only big chain within a 20-mile radius. It wasn't exactly crowded, especially not at 10:30 p.m. on a weeknight. I like going around this time. No one in my way, no rush, just me in the aisles of overpriced food under fluorescent lights. I wasn't even there for anything special. Just a few odds and ends. Some eggs, maybe a frozen pizza. Nothing that would require me to spend more than 10 minutes inside. I took my time though, mostly out of habit, walking the aisles even when I didn't need anything from them. It was a weird ritual of mine, scanning shelves for sales, for anything I might want later. I never needed half the things I put in my cart, but something about walking through those aisles alone felt oddly peaceful. That is, until I got to the bread aisle. I remember it was cold there, colder than the rest of the store, which made no sense because it wasn't near the freezers. I even rubbed my arms for warmth as I stepped into the aisle, eyeing the shelves stacked with tortillas, loaves of bread, and bagels. That's when it happened. A pack of corn tortillas jumped off the shelf. Not slid, not fell, jumped, right in front of me. The package hit the floor with a soft thud, landing almost perfectly upright, still sealed, completely intact. I stopped dead in my tracks. There was no one else around. No employee stocking the shelves, no other customers walking past. Just me. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to process what I had just seen. My first thought was that maybe the tortillas had been wedged between other packages at an odd angle, maybe just barely hanging on. Maybe I had disturbed the air by walking past and caused them to tip. But I knew that wasn't true. I had seen it with my own eyes. The way they left the shelf. It wasn't gravity. It wasn't an accident. It was like something had thrown them. I took a step back, glancing up and down the aisle, suddenly hyper-aware of how empty the store was. My ears strained to hear anything. Footsteps, a voice, maybe someone laughing from around the corner. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the overhead lights, just the sound of my own breathing, suddenly too loud. I considered picking up the tortillas, maybe put them back, pretend nothing happened. But the idea of bending down, of taking my eyes off the aisle for even a second, made my stomach clench. My instincts were screaming at me, "Don't turn your back. Don't look away." And then, the air changed. I don't know how to describe it. The temperature didn't drop, but it felt thicker, heavy, like something was standing right behind me, watching. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, but I felt it. Every hair on my body stood on end. I swallowed hard, backing up step by step, never taking my eyes off the tortillas on the floor. My gut told me to leave, get out. Now, and for once, I listened. I left my cart. I didn't even try to act normal. I turned on my heel and walked straight to the front of the store, my heart hammering. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me or worse, feel a hand on my shoulder. But there was nothing, just silence. The cashier barely looked up as I power walked past the registers. I think she muttered something, maybe a "have a good night" or a "need any help?" But I didn't stop. I stepped out into the parking lot, letting the automatic doors slide shut behind me, sealing whatever that was inside. I sat in my car with my hands on the wheel, just breathing. My heart was racing, my skin clammy. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it, that it was nothing, just a coincidence. But I knew better. Something had been in that aisle with me. Something had wanted me to see. And I don't know why, but the worst part, it wasn't just the tortillas moving on their own. It was the feeling that they weren't the only thing that could. Story 2. I used to live in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building. It wasn't anything special, just cheap enough for me to afford on my own. The place had creaky wooden floors, thin walls, and pipes that groaned whenever I used the shower. It wasn't in the best part of town, but it was quiet, and I liked my privacy. I worked late shifts at a bar downtown, so I was usually home around 2 or 3 in the morning. That night, I got home around my usual time, kicked off my shoes, and tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter. The apartment felt unusually cold, not just the kind of cold you get when you forget to turn on the heat, something deeper, like it had seeped into the walls. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, telling myself I was just overthinking it. I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and left my scarf draped over the top of the bathroom door like I always did. It was one of those long knit scarves with tassels at the end, something I'd owned for years. I left the door slightly ajar and headed to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water before bed. As I turned around, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. It was just a flicker, but enough to make me stop. My heart kicked up a notch. I looked over at the bathroom door. The bottom half of my scarf was lifted, suspended at an angle, about 20 degrees from where it should have been. The tassels hung stiffly, completely motionless, like they were frozen in place. I blinked, expecting it to drop, but it didn't. A chill ran down my spine. I took a step closer. The air felt thick, charged. It was like stepping into a static field, something unseen pressing against my skin. My breath hitched. Then the scarf fell. Not like it had been gently let go, but like whatever was holding it up had just vanished. It dropped so fast that the tassels barely had time to sway before settling back against the door. I stood there, rooted to the spot. My hands had gone clammy. There was no draft, no vent above the door, no open window. Nothing that could have lifted it like that, let alone held it in place. My mouth felt dry. My first thought was, I need to get out of here. But I was frozen. I wanted to convince myself that I had imagined it, that I was just tired, that it was something, anything, other than what I knew, deep down, had just happened. Then came the whisper, right behind me. A soft, breathy sound, like someone murmuring just at the edge of hearing. I couldn't make out words, but I could feel them, hot and damp against the back of my neck. My stomach dropped. I spun around so fast I almost knocked over the glass of water. No one was there, but I swear I felt it. The sensation of someone inches away. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone off the counter, nearly dropping it as I fumbled to unlock it. I needed to call someone, anyone. Before I could dial, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely. The apartment plunged into darkness. My breath came in shallow gasps. I turned the phone's flashlight on, sweeping it around the room. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was standing just beyond the edge of the light, watching me. The air pressed in around me, heavy, suffocating. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and frantic. Then the sound started, a slow, deliberate creak. Not from the floorboards beneath my feet, but from the bathroom. The door. It was moving. My eyes darted to the scarf. It was still hanging there, untouched. But the door, it was opening. Inch by inch, the darkness of the bathroom creeping into the light from my phone. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in me screamed not to look, but I couldn't stop myself. My flashlight beam trembled as I aimed it at the widening gap. And then I saw it, a shadow, not cast by my phone, not cast by anything in the room. It was inside the bathroom, moving, shifting, and it was tall, too tall. It didn't have features, didn't have eyes, but I knew. It was looking at me. I bolted. I don't remember grabbing my coat. I don't remember putting on my shoes. One moment I was in that apartment, the next I was outside, my breath clouding in the cold night air. I made it to the sidewalk before my knees gave out. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking, staring up at my dark apartment window, but eventually I called my grandma. I didn't even think, I just dialed. When she picked up, I broke down, sobbing so hard she couldn't understand me at first. But she knew something was wrong. She didn't ask questions. She just told me to stay where I was. 10 minutes later, she pulled up in her car, still in her nightgown. She didn't say anything when she saw me, just unlocked the door and waited for me to get in. I never slept in that apartment again. Story 3. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in a small town. Not the kind of place you'd expect anything weird to happen. The houses were spaced out, yards big, and at night it was dark. No streetlights, just the glow from porch lights and the occasional car passing by. Our house was an older 2-story with creaky floors, and if you were alone at night, you'd hear sounds, pops, clicks, settling wood. But you told yourself it was just the house breathing. I was in high school at the time. My parents worked shift jobs at the hospital, so some nights I was home alone with our dog, Max. It never really bothered me. The house was familiar, and Max was good company. He wasn't a big dog, just a scruffy mutt, but he barked at strangers, so I figured if anything weird happened, he'd let me know. That night, my dad had left for his shift in the afternoon, and my mom was getting ready to leave around 10. I was in the living room, half watching TV, half scrolling through my phone, when she grabbed her bag and called out, "I'm heading out." She stopped near the stairs and pointed, "Hey, put those in the hamper before you go to bed." I looked over. A small pile of my dad's t-shirts was on the floor near the staircase. Max liked to lay on them. I don't know why. Maybe they smelled like my dad. I got up, scooped them up, and without thinking, I tossed them up the stairs. They landed in the hallway at the top, right where I expected them to. My mom was still scratching Max's ears by the door. She gave me a look. "In the hamper." "I know, I'll get them when I go up." She shook her head, smiling. "All right, lock the door after me." She stepped out, and I heard the door latch shut. I walked over and slid the deadbolt. Max stood there for a second, sniffed at the bottom of the door, then turned and trotted toward the stairs. "Come on, buddy, bedtime." We climbed the stairs together, me ahead, him behind. At the top, I reached down to grab the shirts so I could take them the rest of the way to the hamper. But they weren't there. I stopped, looked around. The hallway was empty. Max brushed past me and walked toward my room. I stood there, stomach tightening. I knew. I had just thrown them up here. I had seen them land. I checked my bedroom, flicking on the light. Not on my bed, not on the floor. I stepped back out, checked the bathroom. Nothing. Max had wandered into my parents' room at the end of the hall, his nails clicking against the wood floor. The door was open just a crack, the way my mom always left it when she wasn't home. I hesitated. The hallway felt wrong. Not cold, not like in movies where the air drops suddenly. Just wrong. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I pushed the door open wider. The shirts were there, in the middle of the floor. I just stared. My chest felt tight, my fingers tingled. I didn't throw them there. I couldn't have. The hallway runs perpendicular to my parents' bedroom. I would have had to throw them at a hard right angle, over a solid wood railing, through a mostly closed door, and somehow landed them perfectly in the center of the floor. I backed out of the room slowly. Max stood there, staring at the shirts, tail lowered. He wasn't growling, wasn't whining, but his ears were up, alert. He saw it too. And then, before I could think, before I could move, I heard it. A shuffle. Not from the hallway, not from my room, from inside my parents' closet. The door was cracked open, just a few inches. Just enough to see darkness beyond it. My body locked up. My brain started throwing logic at me. Maybe something fell, maybe a draft. But there was no draft, and nothing in that closet was stacked high enough to just fall over on its own. Max took a step backward. His tail went between his legs, his head lowered. I ran. I bolted down the stairs so fast I nearly tripped. Max scrambled after me, his claws skidding on the wood. I didn't stop until I hit the front door, yanking it open without even thinking. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I ran barefoot onto the porch, Max right behind me. I turned back, staring at the upstairs hallway through the open door. My breath was coming fast, my chest tight. Nothing. No movement, no sound. Just the house. Silent. I stood there for what felt like forever. Then slowly, I stepped back inside. My heart was pounding in my ears. Max stayed right at my heel. I reached out, shut the door, and locked it again. I did not go back upstairs that night. Story 4. I work at a cemetery. Not the fun, Halloween version people joke about, but the real kind. The kind where people grieve, where silence isn't eerie, it's expected. My job mostly involves paperwork, keeping track of plots and handling records. Nothing dramatic. It's quiet work, the type that makes you forget how much space the dead take up around you. One evening, I had stayed late to catch up. The office was small, just a little building near the entrance, away from the main graves. By the time I was finishing up, the sun had set, and the air had that crisp bite that made you aware of your own breathing. I had locked the doors already, shutting down for the night, but I needed to take pictures of some new granite samples we had gotten in. Just something to have on my phone for reference. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I stood near the front desk, my phone in one hand, adjusting the lighting, when I heard it, the sound of the basement door swinging open. It didn't just open, it slammed. The sharp crack of wood on wood echoed through the office, making me freeze. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, each step creaking against the old wooden stairs as something moved down into the basement. I stood there, heart pounding, phone still raised in my hand like it might somehow help. The only people with keys to the office were myself and maintenance, but they had all gone home. I knew that. I had watched them leave. I swallowed hard, trying to think. Maybe someone had slipped in when I wasn't paying attention. Maybe I had left a door unlocked without realizing it. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, but the way the door had slammed, no, that was force. Someone had pushed it open. I took a breath and called out, "Hello?" Silence. I felt my throat tighten. I cleared it and tried again, a little louder. "Maintenance?" Nothing. The basement in that office wasn't big. It was just a small storage space where we kept old records and extra supplies. If someone was down there, they'd hear me. They would answer. But they didn't. I should have left. I should have turned around, walked out the door, and called the police. But I didn't. Something about the whole thing made my skin crawl. If it wasn't maintenance, that meant someone had broken in. And if they were hiding down there, that meant they weren't just looking to rob the place. I stood there listening, straining to hear anything. Breathing, shuffling, movement. Nothing. I told myself I had to check. I don't know why. Maybe just to prove to myself that it was nothing, that my mind was playing tricks on me. Slowly, I moved toward the basement door. It was half open now, hanging there like a mouth ajar, waiting. My fingers shook as I reached for the light switch just inside the frame. I flicked it on. Dim yellow light spilled down the stairs, barely touching the bottom. The basement wasn't big, but the way the shadows clung to the edges made it feel endless. I leaned forward, just enough to get a better view. Empty. There was no one there. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My whole body felt tight, my muscles locked in place. But something wasn't right. I looked at the door again, then at the stairs. I knew what I had heard. The door had slammed open. I had heard the footsteps going down. I took a step back. My skin prickled. The office felt different now, heavier, like the walls were pressing in just a little closer. That's when the light went out. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then from the darkness below, I heard it. A single step, slow, deliberate, coming up. I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I don't remember how I got outside. 1 second I was in the office, and the next I was standing in the parking lot, my breath coming in gasps, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I turned back expecting, what? Someone standing in the window? A figure in the doorway? There was nothing. Just the building, silent, still, the basement door hidden from view inside. I called maintenance. They sent someone over, but of course, no one was there. The doors were all locked, just like I had left them. No sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. The next day, I checked the security cameras. The office had a few, one by the entrance, one inside, and one pointing at the hallway leading to the basement. I scrolled through the footage, heart hammering, waiting to see something, anything. I saw myself standing at the front desk, taking pictures. Then I saw myself react to the sound, turning toward the basement door, but the door never moved. It never opened, and I was the only one there. I don't stay late anymore. Story 5. I don't usually wake up in the middle of the night. When I sleep deep. But that night, something pulled me out of it. Like the air in my room had shifted. Like something was there that wasn't supposed to be. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building. It's not fancy, but it's cheap, and it's quiet most of the time. The walls are thin, but my neighbors usually go to bed early. I keep my place pretty dark when I sleep. Blackout curtains over the window, only the dim glow from my phone charger breaking through. I don't know why I woke up. Maybe a noise, maybe nothing. But I reached over and grabbed my phone off the nightstand, squinting against the sudden brightness. 3:14 a.m. I sighed and was about to put it back down when something told me, no, made me look up. There, standing at the foot of my bed, was a figure. Tall, inhumanly tall. It nearly reached the ceiling, a stretched-out shadow with no details, no features, just pure, solid black. It wasn't like a regular shadow either. Shadows don't block out things behind them, but this one did. Behind it, on the wall, I should have been able to see the broken clock that had hung there for months. The one I never got around to taking down, but I couldn't see it. The figure swallowed it, absorbed it. Like it was real, like it was there. My whole body locked up. My breathing turned shallow and I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was pressing down on it. I just stared. The figure didn't move. It didn't shift, didn't sway. It was like it was waiting, watching. Seconds dragged. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Sleep paralysis? But I could move my fingers, could clutch my phone tighter. A trick of the light? But there was no light. A hallucination? No, this was real. Too real. I don't know how long I stared. It felt like forever. My breathing got more ragged, panic rising in my throat like bile. I kept waiting for it to do something, lunge at me, speak, move. But it just stood there. And then, I don't know why, I looked away. Maybe my body just couldn't take it anymore. Maybe my mind needed an escape. My eyes darted to the side, to my phone screen still glowing in my hand. When I looked back, it was gone. Just vanished. Like it had never been there at all. But it had been. I knew it had. My whole body still felt frozen. My chest still ached. My mind was still screaming. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't even move. I just sat there, phone clutched in my shaking hand, staring at the space where it had been. I never saw it again. Story 6. I used to live with my mom in this old apartment. It wasn't anything special, just one of those worn-out places with thin walls and a weird smell that never really went away. I never liked being alone in my room at night. There was always this feeling, like something was watching me. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was just being paranoid, but it never really left me. Then I started waking up at exactly 3 a.m. Not 3:02, not 2:58, always 3:00. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe I was just stressed or my body was messing with me. But then one night, I heard someone call my name. It was a woman's voice, soft at first. "Hey!" I froze. My mom was asleep. My brother was in his room. We didn't have any guests. Then she said my name, clear as day, closer this time. "Hey, your name?" I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was dark, but I could feel something there. I couldn't see her. I swear, I couldn't see anything, but I knew she was there. The voice was coming from the corner of my room. I couldn't move. My breath felt stuck in my throat. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming towards me. "Hey!" I bolted. I didn't think. I just ran. I flew out of bed so fast I almost tripped, but I caught myself and sprinted down the hall to my brother's room. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I felt her right behind me, just inches away. His door was open, thank God. I jumped into his bed, shaking him. "Wake up! Wake up!" But my brother sleeps like the dead. He just groaned and rolled over. Then I heard it. Footsteps, right at the doorway. I gripped my brother's arm so hard I probably left bruises. I didn't dare look. I knew if I looked, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to see. My body was locked up, every muscle stiff and useless. But my mind was screaming at me to run, to do something. The room was silent, except for my own ragged breathing. Then after what felt like forever, I felt the air shift, like something turned away. The pressure in the room lifted. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, slowly faded. I stayed there the rest of the night, not moving, barely breathing. My mom never believed me. She said it was just a dream. that I was half asleep and imagining things. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I never slept in that room alone again. Story 7. I went to a school that had a bit of a reputation. It wasn't some old Gothic place with a history of hauntings or anything like that. But weird things happened there sometimes. People whispered about strange noises in the dorms, doors opening on their own, stuff disappearing and turning up in places they shouldn't be. I never paid much attention to it. That was just part of life in an old student house. Creaky floors, bad plumbing, wind rattling the windows. Nothing supernatural about it. At least that's what I thought until that night. It was a weekend, and pretty much everyone was down at the school building, partying. It was just me and this girl, Lisa, left in the house. We weren't even close friends. We just happened to be the only ones who hadn't gone out. I was in the living room on the couch, half watching something on my laptop, while Lisa sat next to me scrolling on her phone. It was quiet, peaceful even. Then we heard it. Footsteps. From the attic. At first I ignored it. Houses make noises. But then Lisa looked at me, her face pale, and I knew she heard it too. "Is someone up there?" she whispered. I shook my head. "It's just storage. No one sleeps up there." The footsteps weren't stopping. They were slow and deliberate, moving across the attic floor, heavy like someone in boots. Then they paused and the sound shifted. Instead of boots, it was bare feet slapping against the wood, like someone stepping out of a shower. My stomach twisted. The footsteps came to the attic stairs, and then they started coming down. Lisa grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. We just sat there, staring at the door that led to the attic, listening to whatever it was descending step by step. Thud, thud, thud. I wanted to believe it was one of our friends coming back early, maybe drunk, wandering around, but no one should have been up there to begin with. And something about those footsteps, they weren't right. The rhythm was off, too slow, too purposeful. The last step creaked. It was in the hallway now. Neither of us spoke. I don't even think we were breathing. We just sat there, frozen, as the wet footsteps moved across the wooden floor, heading straight toward the living room. Then it entered. We couldn't see anything. There was nothing there. But we could hear it, the sound of bare feet sticking slightly to the floor with each step. The heavy presence of something moving in the space around us. The footsteps stopped. Right in front of us. Silence. Lisa's grip tightened on my arm. I didn't dare blink. We just stared at the empty air in front of us, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then my eyes shifted. Something moved behind Lisa. The blinds. The massive, heavy industrial blinds that covered the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. One of them lifted. Not fluttered, not swayed. Lifted. The thick, weighted bottom rose steadily, as if someone were pulling it up by an invisible string. My mouth went dry. Then suddenly, bang! The blind slammed into the window with such force that the entire frame shook. The impact was loud enough to shatter the silence, to rattle through my skull. Lisa screamed and practically jumped onto my lap, burying her face in my chest. I just sat there, staring at the window, heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The blind settled. The room fell silent again. And whatever had been standing in front of us was gone. We didn't talk. We didn't move for what felt like an eternity. Then Lisa whispered, voice shaking, "Did you see that?" I nodded, slowly. She grabbed my wrist. "Tell me that was the wind." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't. There was no wind. The windows were closed. And even if they weren't, no draft could have lifted that blind the way it did, let alone slam it with enough force to shake the room. We sat there until we heard the others coming back, their laughter and voices breaking through the suffocating silence. We didn't tell them what happened. We just sat there, pale and shaken, pretending everything was normal. But from that night on, I stopped trying to explain things away. Because some things don't have explanations. Story 8. I was 19, living in a small apartment with 3 roommates. The place wasn't much. Old carpet, thin walls, and a layout that made no sense. The living room and kitchen were in one half, and two short hallways formed an L shape leading to the bedrooms and the bathroom. My room was at the top of the L, with the bathroom right at the corner where the two hallways met. I worked weird hours, mostly night shifts. That meant I was always up late, wandering the apartment in the dark, too tired to bother turning lights on. I knew the layout well enough to move through it, half asleep, so that night wasn't any different. It was sometime after 2 a.m., and the apartment was quiet. My roommates were all asleep. I left my room to use the bathroom, walking in darkness except for the faint orange glow of a street lamp coming through the blinds in the living room. I did my business, washed my hands, and turned off the light. The second the room went dark, I felt it, a shift in the air, like I wasn't alone. I turned toward my room and froze. Standing right at the junction of the hallway and the living room was a girl. She looked about 15 or 16, wearing a white dress with little flowers on it, something you'd see in an old family photo. Her hair was long and dark, hanging straight down her shoulders. She wasn't moving. She wasn't saying anything, just standing there, smiling. Not a wide grin, not an exaggerated expression, just a small, pleasant smile, like she had been waiting for me, like she was happy to see me. My brain refused to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. My first thought wasn't even fear, it was confusion. Who the hell was this? How did she get in? Why wasn't she saying anything? It was only a second, maybe less, but it felt like forever. Then it hit me. She wasn't supposed to be here. My whole body locked up. The apartment was silent. The only sound was my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. She wasn't moving, not swaying, not breathing, just standing, smiling, watching me. Something was wrong. That's when the fear hit like a truck. My stomach dropped, my hands went ice cold, and I could feel something primal in me screaming to run. But I couldn't. I just stood there, my breath stuck in my throat. My mind was scrambling, trying to make sense of it, trying to come up with any explanation that made sense. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe. Then she moved. Not a step, not a twitch, just the tiniest shift in her weight, like she was about to step forward, like she was about to come closer. That's all it took. I turned and bolted. I don't even remember running. 1 second I was staring at her, the next I was in my room. Door slammed shut, my back pressed against it. My breathing was ragged. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't even reach for my phone. My mind kept looping over what I had just seen. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why the hell was she smiling? I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe more, just listening. The apartment was dead silent. I didn't hear any footsteps, no doors creaking, nothing. But I still couldn't bring myself to open my door. I felt like the second I did, she'd be right there. Finally, I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully, I cracked my door open just an inch. The hallway was dark and empty. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped out. I turned on every single light as I moved through the apartment. Kitchen, hallway, bathroom, living room, everywhere. My heart was still pounding as I stood where she had been. Nothing, just empty space. But the air was different, colder, not freezing, not unbearable, but a noticeable drop in temperature. And it wasn't just my nerves. I could feel the shift, like the warmth of August had been sucked right out of that one spot. I stood there for a long time waiting for something, a sound, a flicker of movement, anything, but there was nothing, just silence. I never saw her again. Story 9. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. Not seriously anyway. Sure, I'd heard stories, seen all the movies, even had a few moments where I felt like something was watching me, but I always found a way to explain things. A weird noise? Probably the pipes, shadows in the corner of my eye. Just my imagination. But there was one night, just one, that I can't explain. And I hate that I can't explain it. This happened about 3 years ago. I was living alone in a 2-story house I had bought a year prior. Nothing fancy, just an older place on the outskirts of town. Quiet neighborhood, decent-sized yard. enough space for me and my bad habit of accumulating too much junk. The house had its quirks, like most old places do. The floors creaked in odd spots. The wind sometimes howled through the gaps in the windows. And every once in a while, I'd hear what sounded like faint scratching in the walls, probably mice. That night, I went to bed around midnight, same as always. I remember checking my phone one last time before setting it on my nightstand. The house was dark, save for the dim glow of the street lamp filtering through my bedroom blinds. I fell asleep pretty quick. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up to a loud crash. Not just a thud or a creak, but something falling. Hard. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. My first thought was that something had fallen off a shelf, maybe in the kitchen, but it sounded close. Too close. My bathroom. I reached over and grabbed my phone, clicking on the screen. 3:12 a.m. I didn't want to get up. Every instinct in me said to stay in bed, go back to sleep, pretend I didn't hear anything. But my body moved before my brain could argue. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, feeling the cold floor beneath my feet. The hallway outside my room was dark, but the bathroom door was open. I could just make out the edge of the sink from where I stood. I flicked the light on and froze. Everything that had been on my sink was now in the middle of the bathroom floor. Not just knocked over, moved. My toothbrush, toothpaste, bottle of face wash, hair gel, hand soap, all of it, 3 feet away from where it had been. I just stood there staring. My brain scrambled for a reason, an explanation, maybe an earthquake, but I hadn't felt anything, and nothing else in the house was disturbed. Could I have knocked something over earlier, and the force somehow pushed everything else? The way everything was arranged, scattered but deliberate, made no sense. It wasn't like a domino effect. Something had moved them. I took a shaky breath and bent down, picking up the hand soap. As soon as I touched it, I heard a faint click behind me. The hallway light was on. I turned around, every hair on my body standing up. I had walked past that light switch. It had been off. I knew it had been off, and yet now a soft yellow glow spilled across the landing. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse hammer in my ears. Maybe I had somehow bumped the switch, but that didn't make sense. It wasn't one of those old, loose switches that flicked on at the slightest nudge. It was a sturdy, modern switch. You had to push it, deliberately. And then I noticed something else. Downstairs, another light. I inched toward the railing, gripping it so tightly my knuckles ached. From my spot at the top of the stairs, I could see into the hallway below. The hall light was on. I knew with absolute certainty that I had turned off all the lights before bed. I stood there staring down at the empty hallway, my breath shallow. The house was dead silent. I debated calling someone, but who would I even call? The cops? And tell them what? That my bathroom products had rearranged themselves and my lights had a mind of their own? I had to go down. My legs felt stiff as I made my way downstairs. I hesitated at the bottom step, heart hammering. The hall light was on, but that wasn't the worst part. The living room light was also on, and the switches, both of them, were still in the off position. I reached for the hall switch and flicked it up. There was a soft click, and the light didn't change. I flicked it back down. The hall went dark. My chest tightened. My fingers felt numb. I turned to the living room, did the same thing. Flicked the switch up, then down. The light responded as it should, snapping off into darkness. I stood there for a long time, gripping the switch. My ears strained for any sound, any hint that someone else was in the house. But there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the old clock in the kitchen. I checked every door, locked every window, secure. There was no one in the house but me. And yet, something had been here. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Story 10. I don't know how many people have been to Turkmenistan, but if you have, you know it's not a place you just casually visit. Getting in is hard enough. Getting out? Even harder if you piss off the wrong people. I was there for work, assigned to Ashgabat, the eerily pristine capital with its white marble buildings and empty, perfect streets. It felt like a ghost town pretending to be a city. I was waiting for my apartment lease to be approved, so the company put me up in one of their government-run hotels. Used to be 5 stars, they told me, used to house dignitaries. But post-pandemic, it was mostly abandoned. The place was enormous but dead silent. The lobby was grand, all polished stone and chandeliers, but the front desk was manned by a single, disinterested clerk. My footsteps echoed as I walked to my room, and when I got there, I could feel the dust in the air. The bedding smelled clean, but the furniture was coated in a fine layer of neglect. I called my boyfriend to let him know I'd landed safely, then got ready for bed. I remember locking the door, double-checking it, then turning off all the lights before getting under the covers. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The room was dark except for the faint orange glow from the curtains, where the city lights seeped through. It wasn't a noise that woke me up. It wasn't movement. It was something else. Something wrong. I was lying on my right side facing the wall when I felt it. My duvet, lifting, not yanked, not pulled away, lifted, slowly, from the corner near my feet. The sensation was so precise, so deliberate, that my brain refused to process it at first. I stayed still, trying to convince myself that maybe I had kicked it off in my sleep. But no, I could feel the weight of it shifting, the air beneath it moving. The duvet wasn't just lifting, it was rising in a wave, folding diagonally, hovering midair like something was holding it up. Then the chanting started, a voice, right in my left ear, male, low, fast, rough. I couldn't understand a single word, but it was urgent, almost angry. It didn't sound like a prayer. It sounded like a command. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to turn around, wanted to see what was there, but I couldn't move. Not from fear, not from sleep paralysis. I was awake, fully awake, and the voice was still speaking. I shut my eyes, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Instinct kicked in. Old instincts, the ones buried deep. I started reciting every Quranic verse I could remember. Ayatul Kursi, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah An-Nas. I hadn't prayed in years, but I whispered them like my life depended on it. For a second, everything stopped. The duvet dropped onto the bed. The voice went silent. Then it laughed. A short, sharp burst of sound. Mocking, almost amused. And then the chanting resumed. Louder, harsher, faster. The words grated against my skull, like they were being spoken straight into my brain instead of my ears. And my left hand, something was pulling my fingers, not yanking, not hurting, tugging, repeatedly, like a child trying to get my attention. I couldn't see anything, couldn't feel a grip, but the sensation was undeniable. My fingers flexed against my will, drawn towards something unseen. I yanked my hand back to my chest, curled into myself, squeezing my eyes shut so hard I saw stars. I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds? Minutes? My voice was hoarse from whispering prayers, and my limbs were locked so tight they ached. At some point, the voice stopped. The pulling stopped. The room went silent again. I laid there, heart hammering, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I didn't move until the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. Only then did I sit up, drenched in sweat, and force myself to look around. Nothing. The room was exactly as it had been, but I didn't stay another night. The company found me another place the next day. I didn't tell them why. I never told anyone until now. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear. Story 1. I grew up in a townhouse with my mom. It wasn't anything special, just a regular 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. She worked a lot, so I spent a lot of time alone, which never really bothered me, at least not until that night. I was maybe 15 at the time, old enough to handle myself, but not old enough to shake off irrational fear. It was a normal evening. My mom had a late shift, and I had the house to myself. I was in the living room, stretched out on the couch, half watching TV and scrolling through my phone, just killing time until she got home. Everything was fine until I started feeling off. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? That slow, creeping sense that makes your skin tighten? It started as a whisper in the back of my mind, and then grew until I couldn't ignore it. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was being stupid, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I sat up, scanning the room. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow of the TV. The kitchen was dark, and so was the hallway leading to the stairs. Nothing seemed out of place, but that feeling kept crawling up my spine, and suddenly I didn't want to be downstairs anymore. I decided to go to my room. I wasn't scared exactly, just uneasy. My bedroom felt safer. I grabbed my phone, turned off the TV, and started up the stairs. About halfway up, I stopped. It was like walking into an invisible wall. Every hair on my body stood up. My stomach knotted so tight it made me feel sick. There was this deep, overwhelming sense of dread, like something was very, very wrong. I had no reason to feel that way. Nothing had changed. The house was just as quiet as it had been a second ago. But I couldn't move. I don't know why I looked back. I wish I hadn't. At the bottom of the stairs, standing in the corner where the shadows were the darkest, was a man. Or at least, the shape of a man. He wasn't just in the dark, he was darker than the dark around him. A perfect, solid black silhouette, featureless, with no details, no face, nothing. But I could feel him looking at me. Not just looking, staring, hard, like he had been waiting for me to notice him. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't scream, couldn't run, couldn't move. My brain was screaming at me to do something, but my body was frozen. Then he took a step forward. I don't remember making the decision to move, but suddenly I was running. I tore up the stairs so fast I nearly tripped, scrambling on my hands and knees by the time I reached the top. I bolted into my room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My heart was hammering, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I backed away from the door, shaking so hard I could barely stand. Silence. I stood there, waiting, straining my ears for any sound. A creak, a footstep, anything. But there was nothing, just the sound of my own panicked breathing. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, opened the camera, and pointed it at the gap under the door. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe feet, maybe nothing. But there was only darkness. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, pressed against the far wall of my room, staring at the door, waiting for it to rattle, for the knob to turn, for something to happen. But nothing did. Story 2. I grew up in a house that I always thought was a little off. Nothing crazy, just little things. Lights flickering, cold spots, that kind of thing. But we always had an explanation. The wiring was old. The basement was drafty. The house settled at night. The normal stuff people tell themselves so they can sleep a little easier. It wasn't until my sister moved into the basement apartment that things got worse. And then one night, it stopped being just weird and turned into something I still have no explanation for. That basement was unfinished when we moved in, but my dad fixed it up so my sister could have her own space. It had a small living area, a kitchenette, and a bedroom in the back. The only problem was the single window down there was one of those tiny basement windows near the ceiling. It didn't let in much light, and at night it was pitch black. My sister always hated it, said it felt too closed in. She'd talk about how she'd wake up and feel like someone was standing in the room with her. We used to joke about it, told her it was just the house settling or her imagination playing tricks on her. Then came that night. I was up late watching TV in my room when I heard her scream. Not a startled yelp. Not an "I had a nightmare" kind of scream. A full-on, gut-wrenching, something is happening scream. I was out of bed and running before I even processed what I was doing. I hit the basement stairs so hard I almost slipped. The door at the bottom was open, and the light from the kitchenette cast this weird glow into the dark space beyond. My sister was still screaming. Then just as suddenly, she stopped. I rushed into her room. She was sitting up in bed, her back pressed against the headboard, breathing like she'd just run a marathon. Her blanket was half off the bed, her sheets bunched up like she'd been thrashing around. "What the hell happened?" I asked, flipping the light switch. She looked at me, her face pale, eyes wide and unfocused. Someone was in here. I felt my stomach drop. What? I woke up and he was standing right there. She pointed to the foot of her bed, just watching me. I looked around the room. It was empty. The closet was open. The bathroom door was open. There was nowhere to hide. Are you sure you weren't dreaming? I asked, even though my gut was telling me she wasn't. She shook her head violently. Number I was awake. I couldn't move at first. I just laid here staring at him. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Then, right before you came down, he just... She swallowed hard like she didn't want to say it. He leaned down, right in my face, and then he disappeared. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding. I wanted to be rational. I wanted to tell her it was a nightmare. Sleep paralysis, maybe. But something about the way she was looking at me, the way her voice was shaking, it didn't feel like she was making it up. And then I noticed her arms. What happened to you? I asked, reaching for her wrist. There were red marks, faint but distinct, like someone had grabbed her, hard. She looked down at them like she hadn't even noticed until that moment. Then she started crying. That was it for me. I got her out of there, took her upstairs, and we slept in the living room with all the lights on. She moved out of the basement the next week, and from that night on, none of us ever went down there alone again. Story 3. I don't know why this memory stuck with me so vividly, but it did. It's the earliest thing I can remember, and to this day, I still can't explain what I saw. I was 5 years old, living in a quiet little town in Kentucky. We had a backyard big enough for me to play in, but nothing fancy. The far end of the yard had a tall, old brick wall separating us from the highway. There were these little holes at the bottom of the wall, probably for drainage. I never really thought about them before that day. Afterward, I never stopped thinking about them. It was fall, and my mom had raked up a huge pile of leaves for me. I was having the time of my life, jumping into it, burying myself, pretending I was some kind of explorer lost in the wilderness. The air smelled like dead leaves and the faint gasoline stink of the road beyond the wall. The world was quiet except for the occasional whoosh of cars behind the bricks. Then I heard it, a sound that made my whole body go stiff. It was high-pitched, a sort of yowl, but not quite like a cat. It had this weird warbling quality, almost like a voice trying to imitate an animal and failing. It came from the brick wall. I sat up in the leaves, heart pounding, and stared at the holes at the base of the wall. And then something started coming out of one of them. I don't know how to describe it in a way that makes sense. It wasn't like an animal. It moved slow, awkward, like it wasn't supposed to fit through that hole, but was forcing itself out anyway. At first, I thought it was a dog, a messed up dog, but as more of it came through, I realized it was all wrong. The body was too long, the legs were too thin. The skin, because there wasn't fur, just skin, was stretched too tight, like it had been wrapped around bones with nothing underneath. It had a face, but it wasn't right. I don't remember details, just that it looked like something trying very hard to be a face, but failing. I sat frozen, the leaves crinkling beneath me as I whispered to myself, a monster. Because that's what it was. That's what my 5-year-old brain told me, and I still believe I was right. It got its front half out, legs splaying at weird angles, head jerking side to side like it was smelling the air. And then it turned its head toward me. Not in a normal way. Its neck didn't move like a dog's or a person's. It twisted, like it was on a hinge, like the whole skull just swiveled around with a creak that I swear I heard. The mouth opened, too wide, and that noise came out again. That high-pitched, warbling yowl. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to get up, to bolt for the back door, but I couldn't. My body refused to move. I could barely breathe. It started to drag itself out more, jerking, pulling itself with those too thin legs. It had too many joints, or not enough. I don't know. It didn't make sense. And then, the sound of a car horn blasted from the highway. The thing's whole body jerked. It snapped its head back toward the wall, that horrible mouth snapping shut, and in one horrible twitching motion, it yanked itself back through the hole. Gone. Just like that. I sat there staring, not even blinking. The leaves rustled as the wind picked up. The smell of gasoline and road dust drifted through the yard. A car whooshed by on the other side of the bricks. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. I don't remember how long I sat there before I finally got up and ran inside. But I know what I saw. I never played near that wall again, and I never ever looked at those holes the same way. Story 4. I was about 12 when this happened, and I still think about it sometimes. Not often, but when I do, I get this weird, unsettled feeling in my gut. It was early evening, just before dinner time. I had been out all day, hanging with some friends a few streets over, and when I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. My mom was still at work, and my older brother was in the army at the time, stationed states away. The house was supposed to be empty. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The first thing I noticed was the bedroom lights. They were on, both mine and my brother's room. Now, I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the most responsible kid when it came to turning off lights, but I knew I hadn't left them on. And my brother's? That was the real kicker. He wasn't even home. Hadn't been home for months. I stood there for a second, my hand still on the doorknob, staring down the hallway toward our rooms. The light in his room spilled out into the hall, casting this weird glow on the carpet. It was unsettling, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had turned them on before I left and just forgot. But then I saw the spoons. 2 wooden spoons sitting on top of the kitchen cabinet. I frowned. We never kept anything up there. It was too high to reach easily, and besides, why would anyone put spoons up there? More importantly, I knew I hadn't done it. And my mom? She was the kind of person who had a place for everything. If she had put them there for some reason, she would have mentioned it. Something wasn't right. My stomach tightened, and I felt my heart start to beat faster. I glanced around the kitchen, my eyes darting toward the back door, the windows. Everything looked normal. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. But someone had been inside our house. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the longer I stood there, the more it sank in. The lights, the spoons, my missing keys. I had lost them a few days earlier, searched everywhere, torn my room apart looking for them. In the end, I had just assumed they were gone for good. I even told my mom, and she wasn't happy about it. But we had a spare, so it wasn't a huge deal. Now I wasn't so sure. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Slowly, I backed up toward the front door, every instinct telling me to get out. I kept glancing around, my breath coming short and fast. My eyes flicked toward the bedrooms again. What if someone was still inside? The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. My skin prickled, and I realized I had been holding my breath. My heart pounded in my ears. I forced myself to move. Step by step, I backed away, trying to keep my breathing steady. My foot hit the edge of the rug near the door, and it made this tiny scraping noise against the floor. It sounded deafening in the silence. And then, from the back of the house, a creak. My blood ran cold. It was subtle, just the faintest sound, but I knew my house. I knew which floorboards creaked and which ones didn't. And that was my brother's room. I bolted. I yanked the front door open so fast it slammed against the wall, but I didn't care. I ran. Down the porch steps, across the yard, my breath hitching in my throat. My neighbor's house was just a few feet away, but those few feet felt like miles. My legs burned, my chest ached, but I didn't stop until I was pounding on their door. Mrs. Carter answered, startled. "What's wrong?" she asked, eyes wide. I could barely get the words out. Someone inside my house. She didn't hesitate. She pulled me inside, locked the door, and called the police. I stood there shaking, my whole body buzzing with adrenaline. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing outside, watching. The police showed up in minutes, but it felt like hours. 2 officers, both serious looking. They asked me questions, trying to keep me calm, but I could barely think straight. When they went inside to check the house, I waited on the porch with Mrs. Carter. I felt sick. The whole time I kept thinking, what if they found someone in there? What if I had stayed just a little longer? When they finally came back out, they said the house was empty. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. But someone was definitely inside, one of the officers said, his brow furrowed. You're sure the lights were on when you got home? I nodded. And the spoons? I pointed toward the kitchen window. On top of the cabinet, I swear they weren't there before. They exchanged a look. Do you know if you've lost any keys recently? My stomach dropped. I told them about my missing keys, how I had searched for them but never found them. That's when Mrs. Carter spoke up. Her son had found a set of keys a few days earlier. My keys. He had never given them back. It didn't take long to put the pieces together. His mom had sent him to drop something off for mine, not realizing no one was home. Instead of leaving, he had let himself in, looked around. Maybe taken some money. We never could be sure. And the spoons? Left behind by accident. That was how we caught him. The police had a talk with him. His mom was horrified, made him apologize. My mom was furious, but in the end, nothing really came of it. He was just a kid, same age as me, but I never trusted him again. Story 5. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, the kind of place where not much happens and kids have to make their own fun. After high school, a bunch of us still stuck around, working odd jobs, taking community college classes, or just killing time. Nights were spent drinking cheap beer at the lake, loitering in Walmart parking lots, or, if we wanted to scare ourselves, heading out to the woods. There was a park on the edge of town, nothing fancy, just some picnic tables, a little playground, and a few trails leading off into the trees. It was technically closed after dark, but that never stopped anyone. One night, 4 of us, me, my buddy Tyler, his girlfriend Megan, and our friend Jake, decided to go for a walk in the woods just for the hell of it. It was late, past midnight, and the air was thick with humidity. The park was dead silent except for the occasional chirp of crickets and the distant hum of a car on the highway. We didn't bring flashlights. Our eyes adjusted to the dark as we followed the dirt trail, half lit by the moon filtering through the trees. At first, we just talked, joking around, trying to freak each other out. Jake kept saying he heard something moving in the woods, but we all laughed it off. Probably just a raccoon or a deer. That's what we told ourselves anyway. About 20 minutes in, we reached this small clearing. Nothing special, just a break in the trees where an old picnic table sat rotting in the middle. We stopped there for a bit, letting the night settle around us. I remember how still everything was. The kind of silence that presses in on you, makes you feel like you're being watched. Then out of nowhere we heard it, a scream. Not just any scream. It was high-pitched, raw, like someone was in absolute agony. It came from behind us, back the way we came. Every hair on my body stood up. I turned to look, but all I could see was darkness between the trees. What the fuck was that? Megan whispered, grabbing Tyler's arm. No one answered. We were all frozen, listening. Then came another scream, closer this time, and the sound of something crashing through the underbrush. Fast. I don't mean fast like a person running. I mean fast like something unnatural, something that shouldn't be able to move that quickly in the woods. The ground trembled under its weight, and before any of us could fully register what was happening, we saw it. A shape, a dark, hulking figure barreling toward us, moving like a blur. I didn't think. None of us did. We just ran. I have never run so hard in my life. My legs burned, my chest felt like it was going to explode, but I didn't stop. None of us did. Behind us, the crashing sound grew louder, that awful screaming rising into something almost inhuman. It was gaining on us. The trail twisted and turned, but we didn't dare slow down. I could hear Megan sobbing, Jake wheezing as he tried to keep up. Tyler grabbed my arm at one point, practically dragging me forward when I stumbled. We were running blind, pure animal instinct taking over. Then suddenly the trees thinned, and we saw the parking lot ahead. The streetlights were a beacon, salvation. We didn't stop until we hit the pavement, skidding to a halt near my car. Silence. The screaming had stopped. The crashing through the woods had stopped. I turned, expecting to see something burst out of the trees. God, I don't know what I was expecting. But there was nothing. Just the empty path leading back into the darkness. We stood there panting, drenched in sweat, waiting. Nothing. Jake was the first to speak. Did anyone see what the fuck that was? No one answered, because none of us had really seen it. Not clearly, just a shape, a shadow, something impossibly fast. Tyler grabbed his keys. We're leaving. And we did. We piled into our cars and sped out of there without another word. I dropped Jake off at his place, then drove home in complete silence, heart still hammering. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think any of us did. Story 6, I was 7 when we moved into that house, and it was the first time I ever had my own room. Before that, I always shared with my little brother, so having a space that was just mine felt like the best thing in the world. The house itself was beautiful, an old farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere in California, surrounded by fields, quiet, peaceful. At least that's what we thought. My mom was thrilled at first. We had been living in apartments, scraping by, and this place was huge. It was old, but it had character, high ceilings, a big wraparound porch, and these creaky wooden floors that made it sound like the house was talking back to you. Mom loved it. I loved it. My little brother, not so much. He was only 4, and I think the house scared him. There was an attic. The only way up was through a little trap door in the ceiling of my bedroom closet. I remember noticing it the first time I walked in. It had one of those pull cords that dangled down, but it was high enough that I couldn't reach it. I don't think I ever thought much about it, not until the day we left. We lived there for a few months before things went sideways. I was too young to understand the details, but one day Mom came home looking stressed. She said the landlord was evicting us, something about needing the house back for the farm hands. She was devastated, but we didn't have a choice. We had to pack up and leave. My uncle came to help. He was the kind of guy who always knew how to lighten a mood, cracking jokes and making everything feel like an adventure. I remember he was the one who suggested checking the attic before we left, just in case we had forgotten anything. Mom frowned when he asked. "I've never been up there," she said. "I don't even know how to get up." He pointed at my closet. "Well, there's the entrance. Might as well take a look." I remember feeling suddenly uncomfortable. I don't know why. I had never even thought about that attic before, but the idea of him opening it up made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way Mom looked at it, like it hadn't even occurred to her that it was there. Uncle grabbed a chair from the kitchen and pulled down the cord. The door creaked open, releasing a stale, musty smell. He climbed up, hoisting himself into the darkness. I stood in the doorway, watching. Mom was in the other room, packing, and my little brother was outside playing in the dirt. It was just me and my uncle. "Anything up there?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away. Then I heard him swear under his breath. "What the hell?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. "What is it?" His boots scraped against the wooden floorboards, then a soft thump as he dropped something down through the opening. It was my doll, my Cabbage Patch doll, the one I used to sleep with every night but had somehow forgotten about. But something was wrong. The fabric of its face was dirty, stained with something dark, and around its neck, a noose, a piece of twine tied so tightly that the cloth had bunched up. My mouth went dry. I just stared at it, my mind struggling to understand. I looked up at the attic opening. Uncle was still up there, silent. "There's more," he finally said. I didn't want to know what he meant, but I couldn't move. I couldn't make myself look away when he dropped the next thing down. A melted candle, wax pooled thick around the base, charred wick still visible. Then another, then another. I took a step back. My legs felt weak. "There's cigarette butts all over the floor," Uncle muttered. "And it looks like..." He went quiet again, and when he spoke, his voice was tight. "Somebody's been up here." I couldn't breathe. That was my room. Whoever had been up there had to go through my room to get in. Uncle climbed down fast, his face pale. He pulled the attic door shut with a sharp yank, his usual joking manner completely gone. He grabbed my arm and steered me out of the room. "Go get your mom." I ran. Mom came in, saw the doll, saw the melted candles, and her face twisted into something I had never seen before. She grabbed my brother, told us to get in the car. We left half our stuff behind. I remember Uncle staying behind with her while she locked up. I don't know what they talked about. All I know is that when she got in the car, her hands were shaking. We drove off, and she never looked back. She never talked about that house again. Story 7. I used to visit my friend Mark a lot. He lived way out in the hills, about 20 minutes outside the city, where the roads twisted like veins through the mountains. No streetlights, no traffic signals, just darkness swallowing everything. The only light came from your own headlights, and even then, it barely seemed enough. One night I was driving up to see him, the air thick with the kind of silence that makes you feel alone even when you're not. It wasn't late, maybe around 9:30, but out there, time didn't seem to matter. Night fell differently in those hills, deeper and heavier, like something alive pressing down on you. I reached the old weather-beaten stop sign at the intersection before the last stretch to Mark's house. I did what I always did. Looked left, nothing. Looked right, nothing. Just the endless, empty road curling into the blackness. I started making my turn when a man was standing right in front of my car, not walking, not moving, just there, 10 feet ahead, right in the center of the road. My headlights hit him dead on. I slammed the brakes so hard my tires screeched, my seatbelt locked, and my heart damn near jumped out of my chest. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just stood there staring straight ahead, not at me, not at anything. The first thing I noticed was his clothes. They were old, not just worn out, but out of time. A faded button-up shirt, slacks, and scuffed leather shoes, the kind my grandfather used to wear. Everything about him looked wrong, like he'd stepped out of a black and white photo and into the present, except something got lost in the process. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. My headlights lit him up clear as day. He was pale, almost too pale. His face looked stretched, like his skin didn't quite fit right. His eyes, I don't even know if he had eyes. The shadows made it hard to tell, but there was something hollow about them, like they were too deep, too dark. I waited for him to move, to react, to acknowledge me in some way. Nothing. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, hands slack at his sides, his posture too rigid, like he was a mannequin someone had placed in the road. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. My breathing felt too loud in the small space of my car. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My gut was screaming at me. Something was wrong. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't sit there forever, and I sure as hell wasn't getting out of the car. So slowly, I took my foot off the brake. The car inched forward. The man didn't move. I turned the wheel slightly, creeping past him. As I got closer, the hairs on my arms stood up. Every instinct told me to hit the gas and get the hell out of there, but I couldn't look away. As I passed him, I expected him to turn his head, to acknowledge my presence in some way, but he didn't. He kept facing forward, completely still, as if I wasn't even there. I forced myself to keep driving, my hands shaking against the wheel. I watched him in my rearview mirror until my taillights could barely reach him. He never moved, not once. Just a still, pale figure standing in the middle of that dark, empty road. By the time I reached Mark's house, I was shaking. I practically stumbled out of the car, my legs weak beneath me. I pounded on his door, and when he answered, the words spilled out of me in a jumbled mess. "There was a guy," I gasped, "in the road. He was just there. I almost hit him." Mark frowned, stepping onto the porch. "What are you talking about?" I turned, pointing back toward the road. "Right at the stop sign. He just appeared. I swear to God, I didn't see him until he was right in front of me." Mark's face went pale. His eyes darted to mine, searching. "What did he look like?" I told him. "The old clothes, the pale skin, the way he never moved, never reacted. The way he just stood there like he wasn't real." Mark didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, in a low voice, he muttered, "People have seen him before." A chill ran down my spine. "What?" He nodded, his face grim. "Not often, but when they do, it's always the same. He just stands there. He never moves, never looks at them." I swallowed hard. "Who is he?" Mark shook his head. "No one knows. Some people say it's a ghost. Others say it's something worse." A cold weight settled in my stomach. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. Worse? Mark hesitated before answering. Some say if you stop for too long, he follows you. I barely slept that night. Story 8. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where the loudest thing you hear at night is a dog barking a few streets over or the occasional car rolling through. Past 8 p.m., the place is practically silent. That's why, when I woke up to the sound of a woman wailing, it didn't feel real at first. It was one of those moments where you're not sure if you're dreaming or if something had seeped into your subconscious from reality. I lay there for a moment, listening, my heart already starting to pick up speed. The sound wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Somewhere out on the street, I guessed. Long, drawn-out cries, like someone mourning. It wasn't the kind of sound you hear from a drunk person or someone arguing. It was raw, broken, and it made my hair stand on end. I turned my head toward my alarm clock, 2:47 a.m. Something about that time sent a fresh wave of unease through me. 3 a.m. was the so-called witching hour, and this was close enough to it to make my stomach twist. I sat up in bed, straining to hear if the wailing would continue. It did. I wasn't sure what was worse, the sound itself or the way the entire neighborhood seemed dead silent apart from it. Not even the usual night noises. No distant highway hum, no wind in the trees, nothing. Just the crying. I got up, moving slowly, trying not to make any noise as I crept toward my window. I live on the second floor of my house, my bedroom facing the street. From there I could see the road below, the driveways, the street lights casting pools of dim yellow onto the pavement. But I didn't see anything. No woman, no movement, just empty sidewalks and parked cars. I waited, feeling my breath hitch in my throat, expecting to see someone step out of the shadows at any moment. Nothing. The wailing stopped. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring down at the street, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. That's when I heard something else. Low voices, urgent, fast, almost like whispering, but deep. Too deep. And the words, I couldn't understand a single one. It wasn't English, and it wasn't any other language I recognized. It was guttural, wet-sounding, almost like someone was speaking through water. I froze, listening. The voices weren't coming from the street. They were closer. I turned my head slightly, my ears straining. They were coming from the side of my house, near the driveway. I stepped back from the window, my skin crawling. There was no reason for anyone to be outside my house at this time of night. No reason for those voices to be that close. A part of me wanted to run downstairs, throw on all the lights, make noise. Another part of me, the part that had every hair on my body standing on end, told me not to move, to stay silent. I didn't know what to do. Call the cops? Tell them I heard weird voices in my driveway? They'd ask if I saw anyone, and I didn't. My phone was on my nightstand. I took a step toward it, then another. The voices stopped. I don't mean they faded away. I don't mean they grew distant. They just cut off, like someone hit a mute button. 1 second they were there, and the next, absolute silence. I held my breath. A minute passed, then another. Nothing. The longer the silence stretched on, the more I felt like something was wrong, like something was waiting, watching. I didn't want to look out the window again, but at the same time I had to. Slowly I stepped toward it. Carefully I pulled back the curtain, just enough to peek outside. Still nothing. The driveway was empty. The street was empty. No signs of movement, no lingering shadows. Everything was exactly how it should be. Except for one thing. My front door was open. Not wide open, but cracked. Just enough for a sliver of darkness to show. Just enough for something to have stepped inside. My body locked up. My breathing became shallow. I tried to remember. Did I lock it before bed? I always locked it. Always. But maybe I forgot? No, I didn't forget. Something had opened it. I backed away from the window, my stomach twisting into knots. My phone was still on the nightstand, but suddenly the idea of calling anyone felt wrong, like making a sound would make things worse. I stood there, my ears straining for any sign of movement inside the house, any creak, any shift of weight, anything. Nothing. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like hours, but it was probably just a few minutes. My mind was screaming at me to do something, to grab a weapon, to check the hallway, to barricade the door. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. Then slowly, the door closed. Not slammed, not creaked, just closed. Silently, like someone was making sure I wouldn't hear it. I stayed frozen, my mind trying to rationalize it. A draft? A loose hinge? The wind? But there was no wind. I waited and waited, but nothing else happened. No more voices, no more crying. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the sun finally started creeping through my blinds, I found the courage to go downstairs. Every light in the house was still off. Everything was exactly how I'd left it. Except for the front door. It was locked, deadbolt and all. I stood there staring at it, trying to understand. Had I imagined it? Had I gotten up in a half-dreaming state and checked it myself? I didn't remember doing that. I checked the security camera on my porch, the one that should have shown if anyone had been outside, the one that should have picked up the door opening and closing. The feed was blank from 2:46 a.m. to 3:02 a.m. No footage, just static. I don't know what happened that night. Story 9. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everything shut down by 9 p.m. and the only real entertainment was driving around with your friends looking for something to do. After high school, most of us stuck around for college, commuting to the local university. We spent a lot of nights at my friend Jason's dad's place, which was out in the country. No neighbors, no streetlights, just open fields and an endless sky full of stars. It was the kind of dark you only see way out in the middle of nowhere, where you could look around and feel completely alone. One night, late fall, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, we got bored and decided to drive out to a radio tower we could always see blinking in the distance. It sat in the middle of some big field, a couple of miles away from Jason's dad's place. We'd never actually been out there before, but the entrance wasn't gated, so we figured, why not? We piled into my car, me driving, Jason in the passenger seat, and our other 2 friends, Mark and Danny, in the back. The drive out there was easy, just a dirt path leading off the main road. No signs, nothing indicating we shouldn't be there. It was colder than usual that night, and the wind had that bite to it that made you wish you'd brought a heavier jacket. We followed the dirt path about a 1/4 mile into the field, and there it was, the radio tower, its red light blinking in slow, steady pulses. But that wasn't the only thing there. Parked underneath the tower was a car. Old, rusted out, looked like it hadn't moved in years. It was weird. Why would a car just be sitting out here? No tire tracks, no signs that anyone had been around. We pulled around to the other side of the tower, parking maybe 20 feet away, and just sat there for a while, listening to music and shooting the shit. It felt eerie, but we tried to ignore it. Probably just some abandoned junker. Then Jason said, "Hey, does it look like there's a light in there?" We all turned and stared. Sure enough, behind the dust-covered windows, something was glowing inside that car. A dim, yellowish light, pulsing faintly like it was struggling to stay on. "That wasn't there before, right?" Danny asked. No one answered, because we all knew it hadn't been. I killed the music, and we just sat there in total silence, watching that glow. It was unsettling, like the kind of thing your brain refuses to process properly because it doesn't make sense. Then the car moved. At first it was subtle, just a slight shift, like it had rocked forward an inch, but then it started rolling, slowly, creeping in our direction. No headlights, no engine noise, just that eerie glow inside growing brighter as it moved. Nope, nope. Fuck this, I muttered, throwing the car into drive. We started moving, but it was a field, so we couldn't exactly gun it. The tires kicked up dirt. The ride was rough, but we were getting out. "Dude, it's following us." Mark's voice cracked as he turned to look out the back window. I risked a glance in the rear view. The car was still rolling after us. No lights, no sound, just that glow. But now it was brighter, flickering, like something was inside that shouldn't be. "Go faster, man!" Jason shouted. "I'm trying," I growled, gripping the wheel. The path was bumpy, and I didn't want to bottom out and get stuck out here. Then something changed. The glow inside the car turned blood red. I don't mean brake lights. I mean the entire inside of that car lit up like a furnace, and it was moving faster. "Fuck it!" I shouted, slamming the gas. The car lurched forward, the tires slipping for a second before catching. We sped up, bumping and jostling as we tore down the dirt path. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it behind us. We hit the main road, and I swerved hard, almost losing control. The second our tires hit pavement, I floored it. Jason was still staring out the back window, his breathing ragged. It stopped. The car. It just stopped. Right at the edge of the field. I chanced to look in the mirror. He was right. It was just sitting there, its inside still glowing red, like it was waiting, watching. We drove straight back to Jason's dad's place and sat in the car for a long time. Doors locked, music off, just listening to the silence. No one spoke. What the hell had we just seen? Was someone inside that car, or was it something else? No one ever brought it up again. Not really. We never went back to that field. Story 10, I grew up in the city, but my family owns a farm out in the middle of nowhere. It's one of those places where the nearest neighbor is a couple of miles away, and most of the houses nearby are abandoned. It's peaceful in the summer, but winters are brutal. Snow falls in thick sheets, covering everything, and at night the cold seeps into your bones if you're not careful. The winter I turned 17, I decided to stay there alone for a couple of weeks over Christmas break. My dad and my brother would come on the weekends, but Monday to Friday, it was just me. I didn't mind, I liked the quiet, and I knew the place well enough. It was home. One night, around 3 in the morning, I was outside checking on the smoker. It's a separate shed next to the house where we smoke and dry meat. We also kept firewood there for the furnace inside. It had been snowing for days, and the first layer of snow had frozen over. As I walked, the fresh snow crunched over the ice, making this soft, delicate sound, kind of like pouring sugar into a bowl. I stopped for a second, just listening to it. It was oddly satisfying, standing out there in the cold, the wind carrying the snow in swirls across the ground. I checked the fire in the smoker to make sure it was completely out, grabbed an armful of firewood, and headed back inside. The sound of the snow was still there, the only noise in the night. I dropped the firewood next to the furnace and went back out onto the porch to empty the ash into the bin. And that's when it happened. Silence. Not the kind where things get quiet. This was the kind where everything stops. The wind was still blowing, snow was still falling, but the sound was gone. No crunching of ice, no rustling of trees, nothing. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe the snow had stopped falling, but it hadn't. It was still coming down just as it had been a moment ago. I felt a pressure, a wrongness in the air, like something was watching me. The hairs on my arms stood up. I turned my head slowly, already expecting something. Expecting what? I don't know, but something. Then I heard it. A song. It was distant, faint, but clear enough that I knew it wasn't my imagination. A woman's voice singing a lullaby. Soft, slow, like she was trying to put a baby to sleep. The melody was strange, unfamiliar, and it echoed, not just from the woods but around the house, as if it was coming from everywhere at once. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My mind was screaming at me to move, but my body refused. The song was getting clearer, like it was drifting closer. I couldn't tell if it was one voice or many. It sounded wrong, not mechanical, not distorted, just off, like something trying to sound human and missing the mark. I snapped out of it and ran. I don't remember unlocking the door. I don't remember getting inside. All I know is that one moment I was outside, and the next I was inside, the door locked behind me. The second I shut the door, the song stopped. Just gone, like it had never been there. I stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I didn't check the windows. I didn't look outside. I didn't want to know. I locked myself in my bedroom and sat on the bed listening. Nothing, not even the wind. I didn't sleep. I packed my things and left. I never stayed alone in that house again. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear. Story 1. I live in an old house. Built in the 1800s, it's seen war, seen death, and God knows what else. It creaks and groans like it's still breathing, shifting in its old bones. I grew up here. My brother and I shared it with our parents and our animals, our dog, our parrots. But we don't use all of it. There's a whole floor we don't go to, a forgotten part of the house, and I sleep in the attic. My brother used to have my room before I moved up there. He wouldn't sleep alone, said he heard voices. As a kid, he slept with our parents every night until I took his room, and suddenly he was fine. He never talked about it again, and I never asked. The attic is mine now. I have to pass through the unused floor to get there. It's always cold, but not in a normal way. Not in a bad insulation way. It's sharp, sudden, like walking into a freezer, then stepping out again. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. I have a motion-activated light on that floor. It clicks on when I take the stairs up, just as I expect. But sometimes in the middle of the night, when I'm lying in bed, I see the glow under my attic door. And I know no one else is there. One night I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone, the kind of tired where your body is heavy, but your brain won't shut off. The attic was quiet except for the occasional rustling from my birds downstairs. Then that light turned on. My heart jumped. I sat up listening. Nothing. The house was silent, holding its breath. The dog didn't bark. The birds didn't stir. Just the glow seeping under my door. The light on when no one was there. I waited, counted the seconds in my head. The light should have gone off. Motion lights don't stay on forever. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Still on. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Stood up slow, my pulse thudding in my ears. If it was a glitch, if it was faulty wiring, I could convince myself it was nothing. But I had to look. I had to know. I stepped to the door, rested my hand on the knob. Slowly, quietly, I turned it. The old wood groaned as I cracked it open. The hallway was empty. The light was still on. I stepped onto the landing, just enough to see down the stairs. The air was cold, pressing against my skin. The kind of cold that sinks into you, that makes your stomach drop. And then, something moved. Not footsteps, not a shadow, not something in the corner of my eye. Something moved just past the staircase. In the dim glow of that wrongfully lit hall, a shape, a figure, standing just at the edge of the light. I couldn't see its face, couldn't see anything really, just the vague outline of something tall, standing there, like it had been waiting. The cold deepened, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to move, to back up, to close the door, but I couldn't. I just stood there staring, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. Then slowly, it leaned, not stepped, not walked forward, just tilted. Like its body bent in a way it shouldn't, its head angling past the threshold of darkness into the faint yellow glow. And I saw its face. It wasn't a face at all. It was empty, hollow, like something had peeled away what should have been there and left nothing behind. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale nothingness. My chest locked up, my stomach flipped. Every part of me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. It was staring at me. Or it would have been, if it had eyes. Then it twitched. The motion light flickered, and it was suddenly closer. Not a step, not a movement, just closer, like it had skipped time. The light flickered again, and it was even closer. I sucked in a breath. Darkness. The light cut out, and in that moment, in the pitch black, I heard it, a whisper, right next to me. I slammed the door, locked it, stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over my bed. My hands were shaking. My skin was ice. I strained my ears, waiting, listening, barely breathing. Nothing. No sound. No movement. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that door, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move from my bed until morning, when sunlight finally cut through the attic window, and I dared to open the door again. The hall was empty. The light was off, like nothing had happened. But I know what I saw. I don't pass through that floor in the dark anymore. Story 2. I grew up in a creaky old Victorian house in a quiet town. One of those places where every step on the hardwood floor groaned under your weight, and the walls felt like they held memories of things they shouldn't. I lived there with my parents and my younger sister, Emily. She was about 12 at the time, and we had the usual sibling relationship, teasing, occasional fights, but mostly we got along. At night, she had this habit of falling asleep on the couch in the living room with the TV on, and somewhere in the middle of the night, she'd eventually drag herself upstairs to bed. This was back in the early 2000s when instant messaging was the main way to talk to friends. I had this old Logitech webcam hooked up to my computer. It wasn't great quality, grainy as hell, but it was good enough to see myself in the little preview window while I was chatting. I was talking to my girlfriend at the time. Just the usual dumb teenage stuff. What we did that day, how much we missed each other, whatever. My webcam was on, and I had the window open, watching myself absent-mindedly as I typed. The way my room was set up, the webcam had a clear view of the hallway behind me. To the left, the stairs led up to the second floor where our bedrooms were. To the right was the entrance to the living room, where Emily was passed out on the couch. The only light in the house at that hour came from my monitor and the flickering glow of the TV in the other room. I don't know why I even looked at the webcam preview when it happened. Just habit, I guess. But in the little window, I saw Emily walk out of the living room and head upstairs. I remember freezing mid-typing, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something felt off immediately, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then it hit me, the floor, the stairs. Our house was old. You couldn't take a single step without the wood groaning, and she had just walked past me in complete silence. My heart started pounding. Without saying anything to my girlfriend, I pushed back from my desk and turned to look into the living room. And there she was, still asleep. I just stood there staring at her, my stomach twisting itself into knots. I could hear the TV murmuring, the faint static hum of the old CRT screen. She was breathing, curled up under a blanket like she always was. There was no way she had just gone upstairs. I sat back down, slowly, feeling my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands were shaking as I typed, "Did you just see something?" There was a pause. Then she responded, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My throat went dry, my skin crawling with something I had never felt before. My hands hovered over the keyboard, not knowing what to type next. I spun back to look at the stairs, half expecting to see something standing there, looking down at me. But they were empty, just a dark, yawning void leading up to the second floor. Something wasn't right. I could feel it deep in my gut. I didn't want to go upstairs, but I had to. I had to check. Swallowing hard, I pushed my chair back and forced myself to stand. Every step I took toward the stairs felt heavier, like my body was screaming at me to stop. But I kept going. The wood creaked under my weight, the first sound the stairs had made all night. I reached the top and stood in the hallway listening. The air felt thick, almost electric. My bedroom door was open, my parents' room was closed, and then Emily's door. It was slightly ajar. I stepped closer, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I reached out, hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. Her bed was empty. The blankets were pulled back, the pillow slightly indented like someone had just been lying there. The room was still untouched, but it felt wrong, like it was holding something that didn't belong. I backed out slowly, my skin prickling with something I can only describe as pure, primal fear. I turned and ran, back down the stairs, skipping the last few steps and nearly tripping as I stumbled into the hallway. My sister was still on the couch, breathing softly, the glow of the TV casting shadows across her face. I didn't go back to my computer. I didn't say another word to my girlfriend. I sat in the hallway for what felt like hours, just listening for anything out of place, anything at all. I never heard footsteps. I never heard the creak of the stairs, but I knew something had gone up there, and I knew it wasn't my sister. Story 3. I was about 9, maybe 10, when this happened. I remember it clearly, every detail seared into my brain like a brand. It's not something you forget. At the time, I was living with my dad in this huge terrace house, 5 floors, built in the 1800s. The place was old, heavy wood doors, tall ceilings, creaky floors that always sounded like someone was following you up the stairs. It had that kind of silence that never really felt empty, like the walls were holding on to something. It was just me and my dad in the house that night. My sister was staying with my mom, and honestly, I wished I had been too. I always slept with my door shut. Always. I don't know why, but something about sleeping with it open made me uneasy. Maybe it was just the size of the house, how the dark hallways seemed to stretch on forever. I woke up to the feeling of something being wrong. You know that kind of fear that creeps in before you even understand why? I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering for no reason I could name. Then I noticed it. My door was wide open. I felt a chill run through me. I was sure I had closed it. Positive. But the house was old and sometimes doors wouldn't latch properly. Maybe a draft pushed it open. Maybe. That's when I saw it. A figure. Standing at the foot of my bed. Not just standing, watching. It was tall. Way too tall, 7 feet at least. A solid black mass. Darker than the room, like it absorbed what little light there was. It had no features, no face, nothing. But I could feel it staring at me. My whole body locked up. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even scream. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen in place, my mind screaming at me to run, to do something, but I couldn't. The air felt thick, suffocating, like I was drowning in silence. And then, it moved. It didn't step back or turn. It just melted. I don't know how else to describe it. 1 second it was there, looming over me, and the next, it was sinking into the floor like liquid shadow. The moment it vanished, my door slammed shut so hard the wall shook. That broke me. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over my own feet as I bolted for the door. My hands fumbled with the knob, yanking and twisting until it finally wrenched open, and I tore down the hall, nearly falling down the stairs in my panic. I found my dad asleep on the sofa, the TV still flickering. I shook him awake, trying to get the words out, but all that came was a mess of gasps and sobs. He pulled me close, rubbing my back, murmuring that it was just a bad dream, that I must have been sleepwalking, that it was nothing. But I knew it wasn't nothing. I knew it had been real, and I never slept with the door closed again. Story 4. I don't usually talk about this because, honestly, I still don't know what to make of it, but it happened. And every time I think back to that night, my skin crawls. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood just outside a small town. It's the kind of place where the biggest excitement is the occasional deer wandering too close to the road. Nothing ever really happens here, at least nothing used to. I have 2 cats, Luna and Jasper. They keep me company, fill the silence, and occasionally knock things off the counter just to remind me who really owns the place. They're both pretty chill, though Jasper is more of a shadow, always lurking just outside of reach, while Luna is the confident one, always demanding attention. That night, she was the one in the dining room when it happened. It was late, maybe 1 in the morning. I had been sitting on the couch half watching some rerun on TV, mostly scrolling through my phone. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Normal sounds. The kind you tune out when you've lived somewhere long enough. Luna had just hopped off the couch, stretching lazily before padding toward the dining room. I remember hearing her claws clicking lightly against the floor. I glanced up and saw her walking across the dimly lit room, tail flicking lazily behind her. Then she stopped. Not like when a cat pauses because they hear something. This was different. 1 second she was moving, the next she was completely still, like she had frozen mid-step. Her ears flattened slightly and her tail twitched, but she didn't make a sound. I remember feeling this weird pressure in my chest, like the air had thickened. My arms broke out in goosebumps. There was nothing there, nothing I could see anyway. But something was off. Then she moved. No, she didn't move. She was pulled. Luna shot backward across the floor, her body dragging in a straight line, as if someone had grabbed her by the tail and yanked her. It wasn't a stumble or her slipping on something. She was sliding, being dragged. 5 feet, maybe more. I jumped up so fast I nearly knocked my phone off the couch. My brain wasn't even catching up to what I was seeing, just pure adrenaline kicking in. Luna tried to scramble forward, her claws scraping uselessly against the hardwood, but she couldn't get traction. Something was holding her. I swear to God, for a split second, I saw her body tense, like whatever had her was gripping tighter. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Luna bolted, shot out of that room so fast she was a blur. She didn't stop running until she was under my bed, and even then I could hear her panting, her claws scratching at the wooden floor, as if she was still trying to get away. I just stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands were shaking. I couldn't move. I kept looking at the spot where she had been, expecting to see something. A string, a trick of the light, something. But there was nothing, just empty space. The silence that followed was the worst part. The house felt wrong, like it was watching me, like I had walked into a room where I wasn't supposed to be. I don't know how long I stood there. A minute? 10? Eventually, I forced myself to move, to check on Luna. When I crouched down beside the bed, she was curled in the farthest corner, her eyes huge and unblinking, still breathing hard. When I reached out, she flinched. She flinched from me. Luna has never been the same since that night. She doesn't go near the dining room anymore. Story 5. I used to live in this old rental house with 2 roommates, but that weekend, I was the only one home. It was a creaky place, cheap, thin walls, drafty as hell. The kind of place where the floors groaned even when no one was walking. But I'd gotten used to it. That night I crashed early. I remember checking my phone before I passed out. 2:38 a.m. It was a quiet night, no parties next door, no cars outside, just the wind against the old siding. I woke up to a loud bang, then another, then another. It was coming from down the hall, my roommate's door, slamming open, slamming shut. Over and over, like someone was pissed and taking it out on the damn door. I groaned, half asleep. Dude, what the fuck? Cut it out! Another slam. I sat up, rubbing my face. It took a second for my brain to catch up. My roommate wasn't home. No one was. The moment I realized that, the slamming stopped. Just dead silence. My stomach knotted up. I wasn't scared yet, just off balance. My first thought was maybe the wind had forced it open. Maybe I forgot to lock the front door and a draft was pulling it. But the front door had a heavy deadbolt and I was always careful about locking up. I swung my legs over the bed, heart hammering. That's when I heard it. The beads. I had these old school hippie beads hanging in my doorway. Got them at a flea market. Thought they made my room look cool. They were swaying, fast, smacking the door frame like someone had pushed them hard. But my door was closed. I just sat there staring. They weren't slowing down. They weren't moving like a breeze was hitting them. They were swinging violently, but in this steady, perfect rhythm, like someone was standing on the other side, batting at them over and over. I felt something cold creep up my spine. I couldn't move. I wanted to check the hallway, but every part of me screamed not to. My bed felt like an island in the middle of something dark and huge. Minutes passed, maybe more. The beads never stopped. I thought about my window. My room was on the 2nd floor, but there was an air conditioning unit installed. If I popped it out, I could climb onto the roof and drop down to the backyard. I actually started planning it, thinking about how fast I could get out. Then, a noise, not from the hall, from inside my room. I don't even know how to describe it. A breath? A whisper? Just this low, barely there sound, like someone was right beside me, letting out a slow exhale. My whole body locked up. I didn't even want to turn my head. My brain just kept screaming, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." The beads finally slowed. Not all at once, just this gradual stop, like whatever had been pushing them had lost interest. I sat there shaking, listening. The house was dead silent again. I didn't move for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. I just sat there, curled up, listening. When the sun came up, I finally stood and forced myself to open my door. The hallway was empty. My roommate's door was wide open. I checked the front door, still locked. All the windows were locked too. I never got an explanation. I didn't tell my roommates when they got back. What the hell would I even say? But I never slept in that house the same way again. I used to live in this old rental house with 2 roommates, but that weekend I was the only one home. It was a creaky place, cheap, thin walls, drafty as hell, the kind of place where the floors groaned even when no one was walking. But I'd gotten used to it. That night I crashed early. I remember checking my phone before I passed out. 2:38 a.m. It was a quiet night, no parties next door, no cars outside, just the wind against the old siding. I woke up to a loud bang, then another, then another. It was coming from down the hall. My roommate's door, slamming open, slamming shut. Over and over like someone was pissed and taking it out on the damn door. I groaned, half asleep. Dude, what the fuck? Cut it out. Another slam. I sat up, rubbing my face. It took a second for my brain to catch up. My roommate wasn't home. No one was. The moment I realized that, the slamming stopped. Just dead silence. My stomach knotted up. I wasn't scared yet, just off balance. My first thought was maybe the wind had forced it open. Maybe I forgot to lock the front door and a draft was pulling it. But the front door had a heavy deadbolt and I was always careful about locking up. I swung my legs over the bed, heart hammering. That's when I heard it. The beads. I had these old school hippie beads hanging in my doorway. Got them at a flea market, thought they made my room look cool. They were swaying, fast, smacking the door frame like someone had pushed them hard. But my door was closed. I just sat there staring. They weren't slowing down. They weren't moving like a breeze was hitting them. They were swinging violently, but in this steady, perfect rhythm, like someone was standing on the other side, batting at them over and over. I felt something cold creep up my spine. I couldn't move. I wanted to check the hallway, but every part of me screamed not to. My bed felt like an island in the middle of something dark and huge. Minutes passed, maybe more. The beads never stopped. I thought about my window. My room was on the 2nd floor, but there was an air conditioning unit installed. If I popped it out, I could climb onto the roof and drop down to the backyard. I actually started planning it, thinking about how fast I could get out. Then, a noise, not from the hall, from inside my room. I don't even know how to describe it. A breath, a whisper, just this low, barely there sound, like someone was right beside me, letting out a slow exhale. My whole body locked up. I didn't even want to turn my head. My brain just kept screaming, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." The beads finally slowed, not all at once, just this gradual stop, like whatever had been pushing them had lost interest. I sat there shaking, listening. The house was dead silent again. I didn't move for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. I just sat there, curled up, listening. When the sun came up, I finally stood and forced myself to open my door. The hallway was empty. My roommate's door was wide open. I checked the front door, still locked. All the windows were locked too. I never got an explanation. I didn't tell my roommates when they got back. What the hell would I even say? But I never slept in that house the same way again. Story 6. I used to live in a small, 1-story house just outside of town, right on the edge where the neighborhoods start fading into farmland. It wasn't anything special, just a basic little place with a long gravel driveway, a carport, and a screened-in back porch that barely held up against the weather. I lived alone back then, and honestly, I preferred it that way, until the night that changed everything. It was a little after 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of the Nintendo. Not a modern console, an old NES. I had it set up on a tiny TV out in the back porch, mostly for nostalgia. I hadn't even played it in months, but there it was, the 8-bit music blaring loud enough to shake me out of sleep. I sat up, groggy and disoriented, listening to the repetitive, tinny melody cutting through the silence of the house. It took a second to place the song. Super Mario Bros., the start screen music. The thing was, you had to press a button for it to start playing. It didn't just turn on by itself. My first thought was that a drunk kid had wandered in. Maybe someone from down the road, some idiot who saw the porch light on and decided to help themselves. It wasn't unheard of out here. The latch on the porch door was flimsy at best. I got up and grabbed the baseball bat I kept leaning against the nightstand. Not for situations like this. I just always had one nearby. Habit. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I made my way down the short hall, past the dark kitchen, toward the back of the house. The music was getting louder. It wasn't just my imagination. It was almost deafening now, way louder than I ever had it turned up. The kind of loud that makes your ears ring. I stopped at the back door. My hand hovered over the knob. My pulse was hammering against my ribs. Something felt off. Not just the fact that it was playing on its own. Not just the volume. It was something else. I don't know how to describe it except that every instinct I had was telling me not to open that door. I tightened my grip on the bat, swallowed hard and turned the knob. The second the door swung open, the music stopped. Not like it faded out, not like someone had turned it off. It was instant. 1 second, the noise was blasting so loud I could feel it in my bones, and the next, nothing. The silence was so heavy it felt unnatural, like the world had been put on mute. The air felt wrong too. Thick, heavy, like the room wasn't empty. But it was. The TV was off. The Nest was off. The controller sat where I left it. The cord coiled neatly beside it. There was no sign that anyone had been in there. No open door. No footprints on the dusty floorboards. Nothing. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. A dream maybe. A half-asleep hallucination. But my ears were still ringing from the sound. My hands were shaking. And then I saw it. The porch door was locked. I never locked it. There was no reason to. And it wasn't just locked, it was latched from the inside. The only way to do that was from this room, from where I was standing. A cold, sick feeling crawled up my spine. I stepped backward, out of the porch and closed the door. Locked it, then locked the back door for good measure. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Story 7, I never really believed in ghosts. I mean, I had heard stories growing up, sure, but I always figured there was some kind of explanation. Bad wiring, animals in the walls, the mind playing tricks on itself, that kind of thing. But that night shook something loose in me. I don't know what to believe anymore. We live in a small apartment above an old community hall. It's nothing fancy. Just a 2-bedroom space with a tiny kitchen and a living room. The hall downstairs hasn't been used in years, but the owners keep it locked up. And as far as we knew, no one ever went in there. It's just a big empty space with wooden floors and high ceilings, dust gathering in the corners. It was late, probably around 3 a.m., when I woke up to the sound of sweeping. It was slow, steady, and deliberate. A broom dragging across the wooden floor beneath us. Rhythmic, like someone was taking their time, covering every inch. At first I thought I was dreaming. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening, but the sound didn't stop. Swish, swish, swish. My husband Greg shifted beside me. "You hear that?" he muttered. I nodded even though he couldn't see me in the dark. "Yeah." Neither of us moved for a few seconds, just listening. The sound didn't change, didn't pause, it just kept going. "We locked the door downstairs, right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Greg said. He sat up, rubbing his face. "It's probably the wind or something." "The wind," I repeated. "That's a broom. Someone is sweeping." He exhaled sharply and swung his legs over the side of the bed. "I'll go check." I grabbed his arm. "Just be careful." He nodded and stood up, grabbing the baseball bat we kept next to the bed. I followed him as far as the hallway, watching as he made his way down the stairs. The second he stepped into the hall, the sweeping stopped. Just like that. Silence. Greg stood there for a moment, waiting. Then he flicked on the light, scanning the empty room. Nothing. Just dust and wooden floors, the same as always. He turned back, shaking his head. Nothing. Must have been... Before he could finish, the sweeping started again, right where he had been standing. Greg spun around so fast I thought he might fall, but again, Nothing. No one. Just the sound of the broom, sweeping an empty floor. I felt my stomach twist, my hands clenched into fists. Greg took a cautious step forward. The sound stopped. The air felt thick, heavy, like we were standing in the middle of something we couldn't see. "Greg, come back up," I whispered. He didn't move at first, just stood there, staring at the floor like he expected to see something. Then slowly, he backed up toward the stairs. The second he stepped onto the first step, the sweeping started again. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Greg took another step back, and the sound got louder, closer. I couldn't take it. "Greg, run!" He didn't hesitate that time. He turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind him. We stood there, pressed against it, listening. Nothing. Silence. We waited. A minute passed, then two. Nothing. Greg locked the door. "We're not sleeping down here again." I didn't argue. We grabbed our blankets and pillows and slept in the living room that night, as far from the hall as we could get. We never heard the sweeping again. Story 8. I live in a 2-story house with my husband, just a simple place in a quiet neighborhood. The backyard has a metal stairwell leading up to the second floor, and there's also the main entrance with a staircase opposite to it. It's not a fancy place, but it's home. One evening, we had a barbecue in the backyard with a few friends. Nothing big, just a small gathering, grilling some burgers, having some drinks, enjoying the weather. The sun had just set, and the backyard lights threw long shadows across the lawn. Everything was normal, just a good night. At some point, I realized we needed more utensils. I told my husband, who was flipping burgers, and he just nodded. I wasn't expecting him to come with me, so I went inside alone. Now, to get to the kitchen, you can either take the metal stairwell from the backyard up to the second floor door, or you can go through the main entrance and up the indoor staircase. I chose the main entrance because, honestly, that metal stairwell always made me uneasy at night. The way it groaned underfoot, the way it led up into darkness. I avoided it when I could. So I went through the front door and started up the stairs. It was dark inside. I hadn't bothered to turn on the lights because I knew my way. But as I reached the top, I heard footsteps, not mine. They were coming from the far end of the hall past the kitchen, pacing, slow, deliberate steps back and forth. For a second, I thought my husband had come up the metal stairwell ahead of me to grab the utensils too. Maybe he'd had the same thought at the same time. So I called out, "Hey, you in here?" The footsteps stopped. Just like that, mid-step. No response. That was the first time my stomach twisted. If it had been my husband, he would have answered. He's not the type to play pranks, especially not something like this. Then the footsteps started again. Same pacing, same slow, deliberate rhythm. I felt my skin go cold. I was standing at the top of the stairs, barely inside the house, my hand gripping the banister. I couldn't see down the hall, just darkness stretching out where the footsteps were. I swallowed, feeling annoyed more than scared at that moment. If it was my husband messing with me, it wasn't funny. So I flipped on the hall light. The moment the light came on, a crashing sound exploded from the kitchen. I jumped so hard I nearly fell down the stairs. It sounded like someone had swept their arm across a counter full of dishes and sent everything flying to the floor. I ran forward, heart hammering, and when I reached the kitchen doorway, my breath caught in my throat. All the utensils, the knives, forks, spoons, tongs, everything, had fallen from the shelf to the floor, scattered everywhere, but there was no one there. I stood there, my pulse thudding in my ears. I looked around wildly. The back door was closed, the windows were shut, the kitchen was empty. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The pacing footsteps had come from right where that shelf was. I had spooked something I couldn't see. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My hands were shaking. I backed out of the kitchen, flipping off the light like that would somehow undo whatever had just happened. Then I turned and bolted down the stairs. When I stepped back outside, my legs felt like jelly. My husband looked up from the grill, raising an eyebrow. "Where's the utensils?" he asked. I couldn't even answer. I just stood there, staring back at the house, at the dark windows above. I didn't go back inside that night. Story 9. I used to live in an old 5-bedroom house with 6 other people. It wasn't anything fancy, just a big old creaky house that had seen better days. The kind of place where the floorboards groaned under your weight no matter how carefully you stepped. My girlfriend and I shared one of the rooms, a small but cozy space on the 2nd floor. It had a big window facing the street, thin walls, and a draft that never really went away, no matter how high we cranked the heater in the winter. It was the kind of house where things just happened. You'd hear voices when no one was home, find doors open that you knew you had closed. But when you live with that many people, you brush it off. Someone must have left it open. Someone must have been talking in another room. Logical explanations. That's what we told ourselves. One night I woke up and I knew instantly that something was wrong. I was lying on my side facing the wall, my girlfriend asleep beside me. The air felt thick, heavy, like the room was pressing down on me. I couldn't hear anything except the soft hum of the city outside and my own breathing, but I knew. I don't know how, but I just knew. There was someone in the room. I didn't see it at first, not exactly, but I could feel it, in the corner, near the door, a presence. It wasn't just some vague unease, not the paranoia you get when you wake up disoriented in the dark. This was different. This was real. I didn't want to turn my head. I didn't want to look. But I had to. My stomach clenched as I slowly shifted my eyes toward the corner. Nothing, but I knew it was there. Even without seeing it, I could feel its shape. Tall, motionless, watching. I swallowed hard. My girlfriend shifted slightly in her sleep, oblivious. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. Maybe I was still half dreaming. Maybe if I just ignored it, it would go away. I counted to 10. Then I opened my eyes. It was next to the bed, right beside me. I didn't see a face. I didn't see features. But it was there, a darkness that wasn't just shadow, standing over me, watching. I felt it staring down at me, close enough that if I reached out, I would touch it. My throat locked up. My body screamed at me to move, to run, to do something. But I couldn't. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. I couldn't do anything. I squeezed my eyes shut again, as tight as I could. My whole body tensed, bracing for... what? I don't know. I didn't want to know. I just knew that whatever was about to happen, I didn't want to see it. And then, suddenly, the pressure in the room lifted, like something had let go. The weight, the presence, it was gone. The air felt normal again. I opened my eyes. Nothing. Just my room. Just the dark outlines of furniture. Just the streetlight glow filtering through the curtains. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to my girlfriend's steady breathing. My body still buzzed with adrenaline, but whatever had been there, if it had been there, was gone. Story 10. I live in a small rented house in New Jersey. Nothing fancy, just a place to crash while I work. I keep odd hours. Sometimes I'm up late watching TV. Other times I fall asleep on the sofa without meaning to. That night was one of those times. It was around 3 a.m. I dozed off on the couch, the TV murmuring in the background. I woke up groggy, my neck stiff from the awkward position. The room was dim, just the glow from the street lamp outside slipping through the blinds. I sat up, rubbed my face, and yawned. The house was quiet, still. Then I heard it, a sound creeping into my awareness, like it had been there for a while but only now registered. A low, growing hiss. At first I thought it was just my ears adjusting to the silence. But no, this was something real, something inside the house. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Pipes? No. Too steady. Gas leak? No smell. Then my eyes landed on the kitchen. The kettle was boiling. For a second I just stared, my brain short-circuiting. The blue LED ring around the base glowed in the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the counter. The button was pressed down. Someone had turned it on. Except there was no one else in the house. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I tried to think logically. Had I done it? Maybe I got up in a daze, filled the kettle, turned it on and forgotten. But that didn't feel right. I was tired, sure, but I wasn't that tired, and I always hear the click when I switch it on. I'd have noticed. I stood up slowly, my breath coming shallow. The hiss of the boiling water filled the kitchen, unnaturally loud in the silence. The kettle was halfway through its cycle, still going strong. And then, without thinking, I spoke. "But I don't want tea or coffee." I heard my own voice like it wasn't mine, like someone else had said it. Stupid words out of nowhere. They tumbled out before I could stop them, before my brain had fully caught up to what was happening. And the moment they left my mouth, the kettle clicked off. I didn't just imagine it. I heard the switch flip back up. I saw the button release. The blue light went out instantly, plunging the kitchen into darkness. The hiss of the water faded into silence, like it had never been there at all. I felt a jolt of pure, primal terror. My scalp prickled. My body went cold. I stood frozen, staring at the kettle, waiting, expecting something else to happen. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on me. My mouth was dry. I wanted to leave the kitchen, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to rationalize it, but my brain had nothing. A power surge? No, the kettle had turned off in response to my words. A malfunction? Kettles don't just turn on by themselves, and they definitely don't react like that. I took a slow step back. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it. The house around me was silent again, but it wasn't a normal silence. It was watching silence, expectant. I turned and walked fast to my bedroom. I didn't look back at the kitchen. I didn't check the kettle. I just shut the door behind me and sat on my bed staring at the floor. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.